Yes, I am.
Okay, clerk's ready to go. Thank you very much. Okay. This is our community's house. We are all guests in it here to serve our community. My name is Mike Little, Mayor for the District of North Vancouver, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here to the regular meeting of Council for Monday, November 29th, starting at 7 o'clock. Tonight, just before I get started, just want to say we're now into this period of hybrid meetings out of COVID. And so what that means is that members of the council, staff, and members of the public can participate in the meeting either entirely virtually or in person as well. And so you will see that we have several members of the council on the virtual screens as well. So with that noted, all 7 members of the council are attending and participating in the meeting tonight. You'll just see them participating virtually at times. Recognizing the state of emergency that we have going on in the Lower Mainland right now with the floods, I thought it would be appropriate to start the meeting with an update from our engineer. So I'm going to go over to Gavin Joyce. Mr. Joyce, can you give us an update on the weather situation, what's anticipated, and how we fared from last week?
Certainly can, Your Worship. On Saturday, on the 27th, we activated the DOC at the Operations Center. It was more of a seasonal event this past weekend. We did have one road closure at the Mountain Highway Underpass, which is below the CN rail. So our staff were involved with CN in regard to some failed pumps. That is now back up online and working operationally, but again, we'll be watching that with the event. We did have some localized flooding, not to the same extent as we did have on the 15th. The Seymour River hit its high point at 6:30 a.m. on Sunday at 2.5 meters, and council will remind my previous update was at 3.35 meters the previous weekend. We still have 200 plus sandbags deployed out at Seymour and another 100 available for pickup outside the Operations Center. Looking ahead, Your Worship, this is now our 3rd storm in rapid succession. So we've been on the call this afternoon with the river forecast. We're dealing with a saturated watershed. We're expecting another 50 to 100 millimeters in what is a saturated watershed. So certainly the forecast is concerning. We're likely not to have so much on the local issues, but around with the higher freezing levels and higher flows on the large watersheds like Seymour, we're going to probably have a similar event to the 15th. So that was concerning. So that's what we're heading into now. And again, it's the 3rd event in rapid succession. Another quick update for council. Staff have met today. Given the current weather in regard to our Gallant Avenue project, it's been very challenging maintaining single traffic flow in regard to the potholes and the gravel out in that area. So we made the determination to remove the Naughton closure at this point for safe passage and safety for residents of Deep Cove, given the fact that the potholes and the water made it difficult to maintain single lane traffic. So we'll pull the Naughton out tomorrow until such time this weather events are behind us and we can maintain safe passage. As events unfold the next 48 hours, Your Worship, will provide periodic updates to council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joyce, and please pass on our regards to your teams that I know are doing extra time trying to make sure that we fare well in the weather events. And the District of Vancouver has largely fared fairly well compared to a lot of the other areas in the community. So our thoughts and prayers are with the families out in the Sumas Prairie region and up into Merritt and Hope and all of those areas as their lives are so deeply impacted by the events of the last week and going forward through Tuesday. Council, we have an agenda that has been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions from the agenda as presented? Hearing none, will someone move adoption of the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Back, seconded by Councillor Hanson. Call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Okay, Council, we have no minutes to receive, and so at this point, we're going to go straight into public input. We do also have a delegation this evening, but I'm going to go to public input first. And so at the front end of each council meeting, the council reserves a period of time for up to half an hour to hear comments from the public. Again, people can participate virtually or in person during this time. We have a speakers list that has been established, and it is quite full. I expect to go the full 30 minutes with the list of people that we already have signed up. And so what will happen is I'm going to read out your names, and as you are, although the first several are virtual and then the next group are in person, we'll make our way through, hopefully with no technical challenges as we've had in the last couple of meetings connecting to some of the virtual participants. So the first speaker in tonight's public input is Emma Campbell, joining us virtually, followed by Harrison Johnston, also virtually. So if I can have the clerks move those over. Pamela?
That's okay.
Okay, and I just wanted to be clear, Emma Campbell, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello, Emma Campbell, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome. You
Oh,
have
okay.
3 minutes to address the council meeting.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. Hello, thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is, as stated, Emma Campbell, and my pronouns are she and her. And I am a settler living on the unceded lands of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam people, and in so-called the district of North Vancouver. And I grew up here and feel so grateful to be able to live here with my husband and raise my 2 young children here. I'm speaking today in support of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty in hopes that the council today will formally endorse it. The science is clear that we need to rapidly transition off of fossil fuels if we want to have a chance at a safe climate. This year, BC has felt some of the impacts of the climate crisis. Hundreds of people killed in the heat dome. The Lytton burned to the ground, devastating deadly fires, and now these destructive, fatal mudslides and flooding. I always assumed that when the climate crisis really started impacting Canadians, we would finally see the swift, bold change that many of us have been asking for years. But despite the death and destruction that these extreme weather events have brought, the Trans Mountain Pipeline continues to be pushed through, and the BC government is sending RCMP officers to arrest peaceful Indigenous land defenders and their allies with rifles, snipers, and canine units for standing up against the Coastal GasLink pipeline in the north. Municipalities like the DMV can stand up and push back against this fatalistic attitude of business as usual. I want my kids and kids all around the world to have a chance at a safe climate. We need to change everything if we want a chance to stay under 1.5 degrees. And we can do this while we create a better, healthier, safer, more equitable society. So please endorse the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty and add our community to the growing list of cities that are standing together as we pushing for a quick, meaningful, and equitable transition off of fossil fuels. I want to thank you all today for the work that you're doing to address the climate crisis and let you know that your community wants and needs bold climate action. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Emma Campbell, for your comments. Thank you very much. The next speaker
Thank
I
you.
have is Harrison Johnston, followed by Catherine Fagerland. Harrison Johnston, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thanks for having me today, Mayor and Council. I'm speaking to you today from the unceded stolen territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. I'm speaking today in favor of Agenda Item 8.9, endorsing the call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. It seems like every few months now, we're facing a new climate disaster in BC, whether it's a record-breaking heat wave, devastating wildfires, unprecedented flooding. We are in the midst of a climate crisis, and that will only continue to escalate. At this point, the question is not whether things will get worse, it's how much worse they will get. How many more millions of people will lose their homes, suffer, and die from the climate crisis. And we know why this is happening: the continued burning of fossil fuels. Years from now, when we look back at today, we're going to look back at everyone who is in a leadership position and ask whether you were on the right side of history. Were you on the side of continuing to burn fossil fuels, exacerbating this crisis, exacerbating this suffering? Or were you on the side of a rapid transition away from these fossil fuels that are destroying our planet? Tonight, you have an opportunity to take a side. join the City of Vancouver, the District of West Vancouver, and many other municipal governments around the world, from as far as Nepal, Australia, and Costa Rica, in calling for fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. Thank you.
Thank you, Harrison Johnson. The next speaker I have is Catherine Fagerlund, followed by Eric Anderson. Catherine Fagerlund, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to speak to a different issue, and that is the Rental Social Affordable Housing Task Force report, the staff report that's being presented tonight. As you know, I was a member of the task force. I'm not speaking on behalf of the task force tonight, but I do have some comments. First, you'll know that staff's response to the our report, the task force's report, was distributed only last Tuesday. Obviously, that has not provided members of the task force an opportunity to collaborate on our reaction, even if we wanted to, and our task force was disbanded. We did, however, recommend monitoring of the implementation of our recommendations under the title, What's Needed Going Forward, Improve Citizen Engagement. We said, the task force recommends that Council strike a committee comprised of citizens, staff, and Council representatives to monitor and provide advice on the continuation of the work and recommendations within this report. So the rest of what I'm going to say are just my own comments. I mean, that was straight from the report. So even though I'm not speaking for the task force, that is straight out of the report. In terms of action plan and timeline, the staff report is a first step. It's essentially a reorganization of the reports of the task force's report recommendations to fit within what could be seen as staff's existing mandate. That is what's suggested by the DNV policy references listed in column 3 of table 1. An optimist may interpret that to mean that all of the column 2 recommendations in that table will be acted on, but when and how? The report is missing a concrete action plan or timeline. It's to be hoped that a detailed implementation plan that can be tracked will follow very soon. Second point, growth, but. Of the 6 high priority actions, 5, and even to the 6th to some extent, that would be priority action A, speak to actions associated with the development of more housing. In contrast, numerous recent voices have questioned the assumption that more equals affordable, and that certainly seems to be a valid question in the district. Same old is not working, so shouldn't the DNV be pursuing some new directions? The task force report lists numerous ideas which staff could undoubtedly evaluate and expand on. That type of initiative is not evident in the staff report. Third point, data. High priority action F does refer to housing data, but hopefully the district will take note of the task force's recommendations for details regarding the use of that data to inform decision making. As an example, under what's needed going forward, monitor progress, the report suggests that housing metrics should be measured by project and by area. With reference to the OCP Action Plan 2021, Priority Action 5, how well is the district monitoring the delivery of housing to support a range of incomes, as stated in the OCP, in new town and village center developments? Sorry? Yes?
Your time has elapsed. We will have more of a discussion opportunity later in the evening.
I didn't think I could speak that long. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, the next speaker I have is Eric Anderson, followed by Jennifer Brunn. Eric Anderson is joining us virtually. Eric, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, and can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief. My name is Eric Anderson. I live at 2589 Rivershire Way, and tonight I'm speaking for myself and not on behalf of any organization that I may belong to. However, gauging from the feedback I've had so far when discussing this topic with DNV residents, I understand that many have the same concerns that I have. My presentation will be brief, since I only wanted to ask Council what happened to the policy with respect to campaign contributions. Councillor Jim Hansen brought this up as early as July 5 in 2019, when he prepared a report with the above title. This was discussed by Council at a regular council meeting, and it was later the same year discussed further at a council workshop. After that, nothing as far as I know. Yes, COVID hit early the next year, and many priorities have changed for everyone around the world, but this should not mean that the policy should just disappear. With the municipal election only 10 months from now, it is important to have a clear policy in place. I suspect that some members of this council are perfectly happy that Councillor Hansen's report has quietly disappeared. However, for those of us who are very concerned about campaign contributions, I think it is totally a fair question to ask what happened. When are we going to hear further from council and staff about this issue? I will look forward to the policy being discussed by council again and hopefully finalized in a timely fashion prior to the 2022 municipal election. On a completely different note, I would like to add that I also hope that council will support the last motion 8.9 tonight, calling for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric Anderson. And I will just say that we've recently talked about getting it back into the schedule. I think I'm going to have to talk to Councillor Hansen about it and Mr. Stewart to make sure that we get that date and time figured out and returned back to the public. Okay, the next speaker I have is Jennifer Brunn, followed by Linda Dong. Jennifer's joining us here in the council chamber. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to address you here today. My name is Jennifer Brunn, as stated, and I am a barrister and managing director at the law firm of Harrison Brunn Law Corporation in downtown Vancouver. Last week, I submitted a letter to council's attention with enclosures addressing important safety and overcrowding concerns at the intersection of Berkeley Avenue and Hyannis Drive in Blue Ridge. I urge you each to review that submission and the 3 schedules enclosed therewith. My friend and neighbor, Linda Dong, is also here to address this issue today. She has prepared a brief PowerPoint presentation that will demonstrate the bylaw infractions that occur numerous times daily at our intersection. She and I own 2 out of the 3 residential corner lots at that intersection in issue. The 3rd is owned by our friend Beverly, and she shares our concerns. As the written submission addresses, we and other concerned Blue Ridge residents convened a traffic and parking task force in the fall of 2020 to establish a community-wide plan for managing the increase in traffic and crowding in our neighborhood. And in particular at our intersection, which has increased over the past 21 months. We consulted with community, met on site with a DMV transportation engineer, hosted virtual meetings and a virtual town hall with MLA Chant, and spoke with several of you as well during our process. We are pleased with the no parking implementation on Berkeley northeast of the bus stop, but that is not nearly enough to address our ongoing concerns. My family lives at the northwest corner of the intersection. We have not been afforded the same accommodations as Hyannis Point or the other homes on Hyannis at the north end. Visiting traffic turns around our property all day, every day, before sunrise to after sunset, rain or shine. Clear weekend mornings are the biggest culprit for drawing crowds, as you would expect, but the traffic is relentless regardless. We do not have the infrastructure to handle the crowds. This results in various nuisance complaints, including urination on our fences, the use of our garden hoses for filling water bottles, illegal dumping, laying bikes, pets, children, etc. on our lawns while pumping up tires and dressing or undressing before or after use of the trails. And this causes resultant damage to our properties and the boulevard. While these are unfortunate and discourteous events that occur daily, more concerning to me as a mother of a 3-year-old is the sheer volume of vehicular traffic at our intersection and the inability to see clearly while I attempt to exit my steep driveway. Visitors are not aware of the bylaw stating you must not park within 2 meters of a driveway. Painting white triangles on the road will assist that issue and increase safety. Visitors are not aware that the Baden-Powell Trail, traverses Hyannis. I've witnessed so many near misses as people run from one side to the other of that trail as inattentive drivers are looking for parking. A crosswalk connecting the trailheads would assist that issue. I see that I have 2 seconds left. I'll be brief in concluding my remarks. Installing no parking signs at the intersection from here to corner would assist in vehicles turning into oncoming lanes. The dead end at the top of the Berkeley Road causes people to either do a 3-point turn in the intersection and reverse up into the dead end to park, or park facing in and reverse down into one of the busiest intersections in Blue Ridge.
It's a very
in short,
issue. I was just going to say, We already have your presentation that you emailed to us. It's already been circulated to the council. So if you could just close it, would be
I will
appreciated.
close right now. Thank you, Your Worship. In short, we need action and we need it now before someone is injured or worse. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to being consulted respecting planned infrastructure changes.
Thank you for your presentation, Jennifer Brooke. Next speaker I have is Linda Dong, followed by Genevieve Noel. Linda Dong, welcome.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Okay. Okay, just might have a technical.
Is it already set up with the PowerPoint on?
Okay,
Yep.
so when I press this button, okay. Hello, my name, I'm a neighbor of Jennifer Bruns, and my name is Linda Dong, and I want to continue with discussing concerns that we have at our intersection at Berkeley Avenue and Hyannis Drive. As you can see from this pictorial, Jennifer's here at 2497 Berkeley. I'm here at 2491 Hyannis, and my neighbor, Beverly Craig, is at 2498 Hyannis. She's an elderly lady, and my following on presentation will include some of her remarks. As Jennifer indicated, people are parking too close to the intersection. As you can see here, this is where my house is at 2491 Hyannis Drive. At this intersection, there is no stop sign here. And so people, because you're inclining, going up, people are traveling quickly, and they'll go wrapping around that intersection. If there's a car here, I have to exit into oncoming traffic, and it is very dangerous. And there used to be a stop sign, and then it was removed due to a neighbor complaint, and I was not consulted. People are parking too close to driveways in contravention of the bylaws. As you can see from here, people are parking well within the 2 meters of a driveway. We've also experienced property damage. This is the boulevard on Berkeley Road, and it has been damaged by traffic, biking, etc. As you can see from this other in Beverly Craig's home, this street at the top of Berkeley Road is always parked full of cars. A lot of dog walkers are there. So there is no turnaround at the top of Berkeley. So what people do is they back into Beverly's driveway, and she has experienced damage here. There is not enough room to accommodate the number of cars there. We also see illegal dumping, from mattresses to dining room chairs to 6 full-size suitcases. We need this to stop. So we want to improve safety and prevent property damage. We feel that we need to reinstate no parking signs at the intersection. No parking signs or triangles or whatever need to be put at the driveways. We need a turnaround, a safe turnaround at the top of Berkeley Avenue. We need to repair the boulevards and prevent further damage and stop the illegal dumping at Berkeley and Hyannis intersection, especially since we're only like 5 minutes from the dumping station. So I totally appreciate your time, and we look forward to any actions. And I, like my neighbor Jennifer, look forward to further consultations with staff and council. And thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Linda Dong.
Thank
Next speaker I have is Genevieve Noel, followed by Kendra Lowe.
Okay, hold on. I have to put my mask on. Put this ticket in here.
And
right there. Ah, voilà.
Yeah.
Okay.
they're just putting a presentation onto the computer there, so it'll just be a moment.
Yes, please.
No problem.
I have a map. Oh, it's okay. Is it this one?
Thank you. Yes, that's right.
And then
First one, please. Thank you kindly.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Genevieve Noel. I'm here to talk about the rampant state in the forest right now. We're hiking every week on the North Shore. We're really blessed in this area to have wonderful natural forests. I also work in regenerative design, and I previously worked in silviculture for 10 years. And my observation are that we really need to tackle the ivy problem. So there's different types of ivy. There's Boston ivy, which has suction cups, little suction cups to stick to walls. But the problem is with English ivy. English ivy has penetrating rootlets that climb on surfaces. You can see the rootlets here, and they're very, very aggressive. When you look at buildings that have ivy on top, the rootlets burrow into the mortar. This is ivy that was removed from a brick wall. So you can appreciate how when this happens to trees, it really goes into the bark, goes into the trees and seeps the sap out and kills the trees. So basically, as we're allowing people to have ivy on their lots, it spreads through the forest. It spreads continuously, it outcompetes any indigenous biodiversity, it kills everything on its path. If you can see now, a whole tree has been engulfed right here on the North Shore Mountain near St. Albans Park. And the other problem is that with those big windstorms we have, these ivy trees are near houses and they can get blown off because the tree is structurally stable. But when you add all that amount of biomass around the tree, they can be just blown down onto houses. Here you can see image of more spreading. Over the years, it spread and spread and spread, and the whole North Shore could turn into ivy. So we really need to tackle this very seriously. Other municipalities, especially in the US, Seattle, West Seattle, are tackling the problem right now, but you can see here, it's taking over everything. It's killing all the biodiversity. So there's programs in Seattle, West Seattle. There's a lot of community effort for the ivy pulling. So we have a few recommendations here. So education, making people aware of what's happening and how it's killing and engulfing the forest and the biodiversity. Prohibition, so anybody who's applying for a new permit should be required to remove any invasive species on their property to stop the spread. And then remediation program. I will leave you with a few options when people don't like to have to pull their greenery out, but there's a few indigenous species that would be very suitable as ground covers that would not damage and be invasive. We have Asarum codatum, it's wild ginger, it's a beautiful shade-loving ground cover, evergreen. Kinnickinnick loves the sunshine, so it makes a beautiful green mat, ground covers, drought tolerant. All these species are adapted to our climate, they low water requirements as well. There's coastal strawberry for the sun and woodland strawberry for the shade. So there are other options for landscaping and ground covers. So I urge you to really tackle the ivy problem before all our mountains and forests are covered. Thank you kindly.
Thank you so much. Okay, the next speaker I have is Kendra Lowe, followed by McGinnis Kosevera.
Thank you, Mayor Little, and thank you to Council for allowing me time on your agenda. My name is Kendra Lowe, and I'm the chair of the Canyon Heights Elementary School Parent Advisory Council. I'm here tonight to speak to you about ongoing and worsening safety concerns around our school, in particular during the busy drop-off and pickup times of the school day. First, I want to thank Council for your ongoing support of the safety of schools in the district, and specifically safety improvements and upgrades made in our community in recent years. As you may know, the front entrance to our school is situated on Highlands Boulevard, a main artery to Edgemont Village and up to Grouse Mountain. This is a very busy thoroughfare. Our PAC has done a lot of work over the years with messaging, encouraging parents to drive to 5, hosting and promoting walk and roll events to promote active travel, hosting walk to school maps with alternative parking indicated, hosting Freedom Friday events and safety blitzes. We have recently printed and installed additional signage to inform parents that pickup and drop-off area is not for parking. We've also done our best over the years to recruit and train volunteer crossing guards from our parent community for the extremely busy Highlands-Handsworth crosswalk in front of the school. We're also working with Culver Man via the North Shore Safety Council to come up with solutions to create safer streets for our youngest community members to travel to school. We have been and continue to be proactive with the support of the school and are doing our best with the resources that we have. But to our frustration, we are continuing to fight what feels like a losing battle. Drop-off and pickup periods are utter chaos, with people doing illegal U-turns, including through our crosswalk, parking in the bus stops and other no parking zones, blocking driveways of community members, speeding and pulling unsafe maneuvers that have resulted in some extremely near misses. Please, can we be proactive to make change happen before a tragedy occurs in front of our school? So tonight, in addition to highlighting the major safety concerns we have, I have 3 asks of council to try and help us prevent this tragedy before it occurs. First, we'd like to see better road marking identifying the school zone and no parking zones, as well as white delineators to be placed in the school zone to slow drivers down and reduce parking infractions. This is similar to what's been done successfully at Larson Elementary and Carson Graham High School. Second, we're asking again to be prioritized for a pedestrian controlled light at the crosswalk at Highlands and Handsworth. This crosswalk is used not only by our school, but by bus stop users, local seniors, and others in the community. These types of lights exist now south of us on Highlands Boulevard near Highlands Elementary and northwest on Mont Royal Boulevard, notably added only after a tragedy occurred several years ago. Finally, we're asking for paid crossing guards, similar to the program in place by the City of North Vancouver. It's a challenge to get our parents to volunteer for this position and to face the comments and behavior of the aggressive drivers in front of the school. We want to encourage our kids and our families to walk or ride to school, but we cannot encourage this with the unsafe conditions that currently exist. Please help us change that and support us in helping our kids, keep our kids safe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Andrew Lowe. The next speaker is McGinnis Kosavera. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a presentation here.
Lots of presentations today.
Indeed. And so good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I live at 318 Queens Road West, and I've lived in the district for about 10 years, and I'm a registered architect with the AIBC. And I must say, as an architect, I was very impressed and proud, actually, when the STEP code came out and the district elected to go with step 3, when actually many other municipalities were hesitant even to go with step 1. So I thought that was really excellent leadership that was shown. And I think with the advances that climate change has made very recently, that all the focus now is really on getting to net zero. And clearly, we're not going to tear down and rebuild every single last home in the district by 2050. So retrofitting of existing homes is really important to get to net zero. And while there's a lot of different components of that, crucially, it means adding lots of insulation. So I'm going to get a little bit technical here, but bear with me. If we're looking at the top of a typical wall here from an old timer house, we've got our 2x4 stud wall with a bit of structural sheathing and some cladding on the outside. So the obvious way to insulate that would be to stuff the stud cavity full of insulation. And that's what I think is a pretty normal thing to do. But with normal insulation, we can only get to about R12 like that. And maybe we can max out at about R20 if we use spray foam. Now, part of the problem with this is not just that it doesn't get to be R40, which is our target for net zero. It also means that because we've got cold on the outside and warm on the inside, there's across that temperature gradient, there's a dew point. And that means that water will condense onto the structure, which is in the wall, which is wood structure, and that will create mold. So technically, this is not really a good solution. What is a good solution, and which widely recognized by Passive House and all of the different building envelope consultants, is called outboard insulation. And that's where you put insulation on the outside of the structure. Here, this would be exactly the same wall, but with 7 inches of outboard insulation, and we can get to about R41. This is not actually allowed in the District of North Vancouver right now. And the reason why is that existing homes are typically built right up to the setback. And if we're going to add outboard insulation, that would encroach into the setback. And the other, so if you really were a homeowner and you wanted to do the right thing and insulate your home, you'd actually have to build extra insulation on the inside of your home. And, it costs money to insulate your home and to do the right thing, to then turn around and say to homeowners, well, you're not only will you have to spend this money, but you'll also have to live in a smaller space because we're going to have to remove some of your living space in order to get there. So, and it also doesn't solve the problem of water condensing on the wood. So the solution, I see my time is running out. I'm going to get to the solution. It's really easy. It's actually something that's been done in some other municipalities, including the city of Vancouver. And that is to use the face of the structural sheathing instead of the face of the cladding for both setbacks and floor space ratio. And that's what this would look like. That would mean that the insulation and cladding, the new cladding, could encroach a little bit into the setback, and that will help to move this forward. So
thank you very much for your presentation. Feel free to send that to us, and anybody who made a presentation tonight, you're welcome to send it to us as well. You can send it to either input@dnv.org or dnvcouncil@dnv.org. Either route will get it to us. And if you have a written presentation, you're always welcome to put it in the tray on the table there, and we'll make sure it gets copied and scanned and sent around to the council as well. So that is, thank you very much for your presentation. That is the last presentation that we have at the front end of the meeting. We do have additional speakers signed up to speak at a couple of the items in this evening's meeting, and we'll get to them at that time. The next item up on our agenda is delegations. And so tonight I'd like to welcome Julia Kaisla from the Canadian Mental Health Association to come and do your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just to describe the process, so a delegation is where particularly nonprofits, but organizations within the community come out to council to discuss an important issue. It means that they have an opportunity for a 5-minute presentation, which is slightly longer than regular, but it also creates an opportunity for question and answer from the council, just to dig a little deeper into the contents of your presentation. So on behalf of the council, welcome, Julia.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me today. I try not to look at myself as we go through this. I don't have a presentation necessarily as a PowerPoint, but I do want to spend some time speaking to you and building a human connection, because what I'm going to speak about is that. It's about a new service that we have here on the North Shore. It's called the Peer Assisted Care Team. And it is a program that is available to individuals and families across our community that are struggling with a different kind of crisis than we've heard about today. There seem to be many, but we're really speaking about some of the mental health and substance use crises that people are experiencing in our community. And we're not always talking about, really serious crises that need hospitalization immediately, but there are these moments in time when people feel alone and they don't know where to turn to for help, and they need some sort of a human connection to tell their story to, and navigate next steps. And the program that we have is a civilian team. So many of you have heard a lot of discussion around some of the new civilian teams that are being launched across Canada and the United States. It's an alternative to a police response, but can be combined with a police response when needed. And it is a mobile civilian team response to crisis calls related to mental health or substance use. We provide trauma-informed, culturally safe support for North Shore residents, 13+. We have some posters here that I will leave with you. Our service is available Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays during the pilot. It's available from 6 p.m. to midnight. And every time someone calls, we'll go through a thorough intake process, and then we will send our team, which is always comprised of a mental health professional, which is a counselor or a clinical counselor, not a counselor like you guys, but a clinical counselor or a social worker or another professional of sorts, partnered with a peer. And I really think it's important to emphasize that we have a peer responding to these incidents and these crises, because what we can do is we can provide help through the professional and hope through the peer who shows up to say, this isn't going to last forever. This is a moment in time. Let me help you get through it. Let me help you get to a point of recovery. We have, people can call us on the telephone. They can also text us. That was an important learning we learned from our community, because people don't always feel safe making the phone call. And we provide our services in English and in Farsi. I want to talk a little bit about the process that led to the launch of this new program, and why this program is also important. And But let me start with what led to the launch of this program. So Councillor Curran, who is with us today, was an instrumental part of our community planning table. We started to look at this kind of a model because we were looking at mental health crises across North America and figuring out what works and what doesn't work and how we could move towards a more innovative approach. So we pulled together a table of experts across the community from Tsleil-Waututh, from Squamish Nation. We had counselors from independent counselors from here, the District of North Vancouver and the City of North Vancouver. And we invited community agencies like the North Shore Multicultural Services and individuals and people with lived experience. So they were also family members with lived experience, so they could provide input into how we move forward with this. The RCMP and West Van Police were both at the table throughout the entire community planning process, and they've been instrumental in helping us navigate how to involve them when we need them and how to respond without them when we can. So we had representatives from our provincial office of CMHA. So the Canadian Mental Health Association is a provincial or is a national organization, and we have a national office in Ontario, and then we have provincial offices across the province, and we have branches in community. And our branch here on the North Shore serves the North Shore and West Vancouver region, the Sunshine Coast, and the Sea to Sky, but our major location is here on Lonsdale. And we partnered with our provincial office, the Canadian Mental Health Association BC division, because they have a long history in looking at policing responses and thinking about how to do things differently. So this morning, actually, I had the pleasure of joining them in speaking to the Special Committee on Police Reform. And we've had many communications with the Ministry of Health. We've submitted a Treasury Board application for funding because we believe this pilot is going to work for the community in a way that other solutions haven't. And we really want to ask for your endorsement. We want to ask for your questions. We want to work with you to figure out how can we evolve this to make it work better for the community. And we really want to celebrate this great initiative. I think other municipalities in BC are looking at something similar through UBCM funding. The City of Victoria was on the call with me today, as well as the City of New Westminster. So they're also piloting similar initiatives. So I'm here to answer your questions, and I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Council, first I'll move receipt of the delegation. Is there a seconder on the matter? I've got Councillor Curran, seconder on the matter. Just my own comments first. I mean, it's critically important. I mean, the RCMP perform a catch-all service in many respects, where when other systems fall apart, then people end up having to deal with policing as a service of last resort. And so it's so critically important for us to layer on other services, because they're not the appropriate tool to deal with these kinds of crises. In many cases, inadvertently, they add a tremendous amount of stress to people that are already in these situations. And so I'm very glad to hear about this program, and wish you very well in it. I did want to also take an opportunity to ask, we were able to use the Mayor's Golf Tournament to help support a grant for your Circle of Care project. Wondering perhaps you could spend 30 seconds talking about the Circle of Care project as well.
I would love to. Actually, Sandra Vasquez, who's here with me as well, was instrumental in pulling this program together. But what we have been dealing with through our outreach services is, as many of you know, is a lack of housing options for individuals struggling with mental illness and substance use disorders. And we have a partnership with a local faith community, actually two faith communities, but it started with one. It started with the North Shore Alliance Church that was looking to house individuals that they were coming across, and they were renting homes and setting up these homes for these individuals. And what they found was that while it was creating some stability, they really weren't able to meet the multiple needs these individuals were facing once they were housed. And so they came to us at CMHA, and we partnered with Health Connections Clinic, which is the low barrier health clinic. And we came together and developed a model called the Circle of Care. And so we have been able to grow that program from 1 home to 3 homes, from housing 3 individuals to housing 16 individuals throughout the pandemic. So we now have quite a body of housing across the North Shore, and we really believe it's another innovative way of using existing stock to house individuals that need that kind of care. And some of them are families, some are women, some are men. We house many First Nations individuals in our homes, and we're able to provide all of their needs by having the health response, the mental health response, their social needs met, and access to community and connection and friendship.
Thank you. They're both programs are critical, important layers of support for our community. Councillor Curran, your comments.
Thank you, Julia, for the presentation and for letting me be part of that task force. I don't know if that's what it's called. In the beginning, I just it was a real honor to be there and to really just listen. That's mostly what my role was there, and to hear from people who have lived experience in our community and some of the barriers that they face. I think we all agreed that what we're looking for is the best outcome for everyone in our community, and making sure that the response is the best that it can be for everyone in our community. So lots of learning on my end. I dream of a day when we start talking about health and it means mental health and physical health. It no longer just means that we don't distinguish, because they're both so connected. And then also just real shout out to everyone on that committee, both the volunteers who spend time to share their personal stories, which is really important, and then the people in our community that are on the front lines in ways that we don't often hear about. And I think the connection with the circle of care, like understanding how all of these systems are not working for so many people, and there are so many people getting left behind. And I think that's only been exacerbated, of course, by the pandemic. And so I know what you're faced with on a daily basis, and what other people are faced with is at times just overwhelming. I've heard so many stories that really moved me so deeply. So I really appreciate all the work you do. I think this is an important step, and it's one step. And we have lots more work to do, but I'm happy to continue supporting however I can. I really appreciate everything that's happening. I'm really excited to see people have reached out to me on other councils to say, how can we advance this in our community? And I say, I don't know, talk to Julia. but I think that it's something that's really exciting to be on the forefront of it in our community. So kudos to everyone for leading, and let me know how I can continue to support. And yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And I'll ask other councillors to frame their comments as questions so I don't get in trouble from the clerk here. The next speaker is Councillor Back.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess I better incorporate a question, because it was more of a comment, but just thank you very much for all the work that you do. I've heard the mental health situation being described as a mental health tsunami that we're kind of heading into coming out of the pandemic. So I know that the need is great, and I'm really proud to see that we have this kind of model being tested in our community. You mentioned that it is a pilot program. How long is the pilot program going to be, and how will success be measured?
So we soft launched the service on November 4th, and it is going strong. We're getting a lot of calls. We plan to keep it in place for as long as we have funding, and I think we'll have funding right now until the end of the calendar year, so the end, like December 2022. We are part of a national evaluation strategy in partnership with CAMH and others, and we'll be looking at both how is this impacting the individual, so is it enhancing their quality of life, are they feeling heard, are they feeling part of something, are they feeling supported, both, and then us at the organizational level, like are we more able to meet people's needs and help them navigate, and then also we're looking at some of those larger health outcomes. So are we going to reduce the amount of apprehensions under the Mental Health Act, potentially, if that's something that we're really focused on. We haven't identified that as a specific act, but also how are we diverting calls from the RCMP? Because you're right, like they are a catch-all, and I think in some cases, we did hear a lot of feedback that people felt supported when the RCMP came to their doorstep, but others were very reluctant to call any services. And so what we heard loud and clear from racialized communities and Indigenous communities was that they don't call 911 even when it's a very serious mental health crisis. So I don't know that those would be diversion calls, but those would be responses for people that aren't getting any help currently. So, and that's also true for people with precarious immigration status and people who are worried about their children being taken away. So, or people using substances. So I think we want to see the amount of calls. That'll be one record. But some of those other metrics, I think we're evolving them as we work with the national evaluation strategy, but we'd be happy to come back and present that to your table.
Well, thank you very much. I think there's so many positives that could come out of this, and I think you'll have all of our support, but anything we can do to help spread the word, I'd be happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Back. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you very much for your presentation and all of the good work you're doing in the community. I try not to let an occasion pass without drawing some focus on the opioid crisis. Last I heard, we're losing 5.5 British Columbians per day to opioids. If that were occurring due to defective brakes or on automobiles or some other circumstance, it would simply not be allowed to continue. And yet it's this terrible carnage of death which we as a society tolerate. I wonder if you could comment a little bit about that issue from your perspective and potential interventions that could be useful. And also if you could perhaps, it's a big task, but just update us a little bit as to your perception of the mental health circumstance in our community. What type of calls are you receiving? Where do the priorities need to be with respect to mental health? So thank you.
You know, I think there have been some calls across the North Shore to decriminalize some of these substances, and I think that we as CMHA on the North Shore, we would support that. I think the criminalization of some of these, you know, what is really like at the root of many of these issues is trauma. And so, you know, I don't know that responding in the way that we are is really helping people access healing and recovery. So I think we do see across our community, across the North Shore in particular, and if I was going to look at an intervention that I think is needed, I think there is a lot of work to be done around detox and some of the other beds also, just supportive. I know you get a lot of calls for supportive housing, but really people with who use substances on the North Shore, there are some very terrifying rooming houses where this is the only option for people to live in. And right now, I think we have like one house with, you know, more than 15 people living there. And for Sandra, who's here with me, and with our team who go there on a regular basis, it's surprising that in our community we would still have that. And so I think there's a lot of focus that needs to go on supporting people at every level, and then also looking at long-term trauma supports for our community. That's a gap that that we are trying to have a larger conversation about. But even with us, I mean, we have seen since the pandemic started, sort of to get to part 2 of your question, we've seen a huge increase in counseling requests, and we have seen the province step up with some additional funding. So we have been able to like almost quadruple our counseling capacity, and we provide low cost or free counseling. But we have seen that request, you know, we still, even though we've quadrupled our capacity, we still have a 4 to 8 week wait for counselors, and we can only offer 8 sessions of counseling. And for those of you who know a little bit about trauma and the kind of trauma supports that people need to kind of move beyond like substance use or other issues, it's a lot longer than 8 sessions. So that is an outstanding issue, I think, for the community across actually across Canada. I think there needs to be more national initiatives on trauma. But, you know, we are seeing, you know, people just, we say they're falling through the cracks, but I think that there are outreach services, and there's a lot of emphasis these days, I think, across all the municipalities recognize a need to help people connect to the services that do exist. But when it comes to actually living somewhere and having a place to call home, we still see a big gap in terms of that kind of supportive housing that we need. And whether that's modular housing, you know, so we can look at sort of a temporary situation and moving into long-term housing, I think we need to make some steps in that area as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murray, your comments? Questions?
My questions. Thank you. I have some questions. Thank you for your work. And what's your total budget for maybe this pilot?
About 350,000 for the pilot.
And where are we? You say that you have it until the end of next year. You'll have enough to fund it until the end of next year, and then what?
And we are applying, like we did say that we are applying to the province to see additional funding, actually, like, you know, to continue it beyond that phase. But, and we know the province is listening. But again, like that is one of the areas where we're hoping to see continued funding. But we have received some national funding. The province has already funded the pilot to a limited extent through a civil forfeitures grant. And then we do have some private funding that comes in from Denton's, like a law firm that has a location in BC, and they've raised $33,000 for the pilot as well. So we are hoping that over the long term, we see more provincial investment in this kind of crisis response.
Yeah, it's so important. I know when you talk about, detox facilities, I cast my thoughts to, not because it's a detox, but it's certainly a full rounded program, which is the Turning Point model. And we have 2 facilities in the districts with Turning Point. And I know that the challenge through personal experience is when you're coming out of detox, and then you can get into a place that maybe can support you. What happens after that? And as you said, the counseling is an ongoing, requirement for people that have come out of trauma or in trauma, certainly addiction issues. And it's a long process to get well. And alcoholics, for instance, once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic, and you need counseling, for the majority of your life. That's very common. I would like to, I think, Mayor Little, and going forward, council, with our budget next year, we have to start talking about, certainly the pandemic, has increased the need. I know North Shore Family Services, their wait list for counseling is as long as yours. Depending on who's in need of it, it goes beyond that in many cases. And I think we have to look at our funding for these service agencies, the what we contribute, and certainly lobby the provincial and the federal government, because the scenarios of houses and some of these horrible places that people are living in to find shelter, but the services that need to go along with housing, make people well and full and heal, is incredibly expensive. And it just can't be the status quo. Every year we do incremental increases. There has to be some serious funding mechanisms. Otherwise, we're just going to, the train's going to go and we're not going to be able to catch it. The downtown east side, it's been gone for a while down there. I don't see it getting better. And I think that Turning Point, those examples are ways of long-term healing and, really trying to get at the crux of the issue. Thank you so much for your work.
Councillor Murray, for your comments, and I will call the question on the motion. This is for receipt of the delegation. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. On behalf of the council, thank you so much for what you do in the community. I know that it's a thankless job at times, and it's hard work, and dealing with some very vulnerable, complex situations. And I just want to express our appreciation for your work in the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, council. Moving on to the reports from council or staff. The first items on tonight's regular agenda are the 2022 utility rates, and this is broken up into 3 parts. I did just want to preface this into to say that Metro Vancouver, the board sets the amount of money to come from your community. And how we choose to pay that bill is the decision and discussion that we're having tonight. And so in years past, we sometimes had the utility rate slightly higher than what was needed in order to be able to blend the rate over years and smooth it out. And that's the discussion that we're having here tonight. This isn't a discussion about how much Metro Vancouver is charging through the utility rate, which is a shocking amount of number and increase and change in our community. We have to pay the amount of money that we're assigned from Metro. This is us deciding how to pay it. And so I figured, as I went through the report on this, I thought that might be important to add, just because I think people have the impression that we're the ones jacking the utility rates, or but really it's bound in the largely the federal government and the provincial government has set higher regulations for how we deal with a lot of the waste, water, and sewage in our community. And because of that, we have significant, particularly within liquid waste, we have significant capital increases within Metro Vancouver that are driving the rates way higher. And that's really what this discussion is about tonight. So at this point, I know we have representatives from finance on. I see Elio Iorio and I believe Rick is also on the line. So I'm going to look to you, Mr. Daniluk, if you have any opening comments on the utility rates.
Thank you. Through your worship, I do. So just briefly, the proposed rate increases are in the range of 4 to 6%, as shown in Appendix A of the summary report. The Metro Vancouver charges, as you were saying, are the primary driver for these rate increases. The district has been anticipating the increases all the way back from 2013, and we continue to smooth impacts on our ratepayers through the use of reserves. We have been working with Metro Vancouver and have been expressing concerns about their charges for a while, in that they need to be aligned with best practices as far as growth paying for growth. So they need to align their bylaws to make sure that that's happening. And we certainly would like to see them extend their planning horizon to a 10-year time horizon so we can more clearly communicate the impacts from the major capital projects in the region that they're leading. That said, the rates before you tonight are based on best available information from Metro Vancouver, and they're smoothed over a 10-year period and are presented on an average basis over that 10-year period.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Daniluk. First speaker I have, and Councillor, do you have a motion? Is Councillor Murray?
Yes, do you want me to move all three or do you want to do them individually?
I think we can do this as all three.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for your comments, Mayor Little and Mr. Daniluk. Yeah, and I think that policy that we put in place many years ago to smooth the rates is why we may be better off than other municipalities around the region that didn't look at that scenario. You know, certainly Mayor Walton and, you know, Robin Hicks played a major role in that discussion in regards to putting together a program that would help smooth these rates, knowing what was coming. I will tell you, as the rep on the board for the District of North Vancouver, there's been some very significant discussions over the past couple of years in regards to, hold on a sec. Shh. I have people moving dishes around. Sorry about that. Some very significant discussions in regards to the fact that growth is not paying for growth in the region. And as Mayor Little pointed out, the federal regulations, certainly, you know, one that hits very close to home for us is our wastewater treatment plant. You know, the tertiary fighting, we fought for the tertiary. We brought that forward. We went to bat for the environment and our waterways, and we got that tertiary. Now tertiary is just basically an automatic in the facilities that are coming forward. But these numbers are massive. These numbers that we're seeing for this infrastructure that is coming to support the growth in the region and to be able to deal with the aging infrastructure and these increased regulations that are absolutely required are massive. And the conversations that are happening around the board table are making sure that we know who we are as Metro Vancouver. We understand our identity. And over the years, you know, I sat on Metro committees 25 years ago, and the work of Metro then and the work of Metro now is quite different. We need to get back to who we are, why we were created in the first place, and you know, get back to the basics. And a lot of those a lot of that discussion is around the words and the comments that I've just said around the table. I will also tell you that the North Shore municipalities I think Mr. Stewart has said that over the past, are working very closely, more closely than we've ever worked together. And you know, we share a lot of concerns in regards to the very large issues that we deal with at Metro. And we're working very closely together to bring those concerns to the table. And I know that my counterparts in around the region share many of those concerns as well. The board is a mix of, you know, the old guard, and I really do think we have a very good representation. These are big numbers. They are going to get bigger, but work in regards to, you know, making sure that we are held accountable and that we don't let the train get away, if I can use that analogy again, is work that's being done. And I hope that Mr. Stewart will also give comment tonight in regards to the work that we're doing at Metro Vancouver. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will list myself as having seconded the motion because I forgot to do that. And so just my comments are largely what I said before, but also I did want to highlight page 16, table number 1, just to draw people's attention to the projected increases. The GVS and DD, which is the Greater Vancouver Sewerage and Drainage District sewer levy, next year is anticipated to go up 22%. And for the next few years, so it's over 100% increase, 103% increase over the 5-year period, just for that one alone. And again, that's to reflect the replacement of the North Shore Wastewater Treatment Plant, the upgrades to the Langley Wastewater Treatment Plant and the Annacis Island Treatment Plant, but also anticipating the massive costs for the Iona Wastewater Treatment Plant, which in my guesstimate would probably be, well, the numbers that are out there, they're saying it'll be about $10 billion. I think it'll be significantly more than that by the time it's done. And so you have to, this is all to meet a federal mandate to make it so that all effluent across Canada, if it is going into national receiving waters, it has to meet minimum TDS, total dissolved solids, that puts it into the secondary treatment category. And so we're experiencing this issue across the entire country, small communities, large communities, regional districts. And it's a bit shocking, but it's largely because we have not been doing the level of treatment that we probably should have been doing. And so I'm supportive of the end goal. It's still a bitter pill to swallow when you have to actually use your utility rates to cover it, but I am supportive of the end goal, which is for our community, tertiary level of treatment.
Mayor Little, could I just add just to your comments? I think it's really important too that we work very closely with our federal and provincial partners, and that we continue to keep the discussion on the table, because you know, a lot of these projects, they are, you know, I mean, Iona is, you know, going to be 4 years late based on the current schedule. You know, the North Shore treatment plant is behind schedule as well for all sorts of different reasons. And these are massive projects that take years to build out, you know, decades in some cases. Iona is massive. What doesn't change though, through all of this, and there's much change, there's challenges, there's impacts that are unforeseen, is the funding level that comes from the 2 senior levels of government. They can give grants at the front end of the project, and as we move forward through the project and things occur, those grant contributions don't change. And it's something that we have raised. It is something that we want to continue to discuss with those senior levels of government. And certainly the discussions that we have with our MLAs and our MPs, you know, we need to make sure that they recognize that for, you know, the municipalities collectively, the costs are abhorrent. And there's only one taxpayer at the end of the day. And, you know, there needs to be a mechanism where those senior levels of government come back to the table when we run into unforeseen circumstances on some of these projects that are for the betterment of the community.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that the challenge we have is that 92 cents of every tax dollar in this country is still collected by the provincial or federal government. We have a very relatively small portion of it, but to meet the federal mandate, we do need to see more support from the provincial and federal government. Mr. Stewart, you had a comment.
Yeah, yes, Your Worship. I mean, just to add on to Councillor Murray's comments, regional growth is not paying for regional growth at the regional level. And that's a real challenge for slower growing municipalities such as ourselves, particularly with a large assessment base. And so one of the challenges is when you have I'm just going to say this slowly, a $10 billion project like Iona, which RAC recently said we ought not to be proceeding with design on until we've actually got some good indication of senior levels of government funding, because that would literally just put too much of a burden on lower government. I mean, the fact of the matter is, what a lot of residents don't understand is, if Metro levies these incredible increases that they're planning, and you are talking 20% on average going forward in some years, we have to take that out of our utilities budget because we know that our residents can only pay so much. And that then translates to eliminating what we can do to serve our residents in North Vancouver District. So this is going to be a real big challenge going forward over the next decade to try to corral this, manage it, get them into the same discipline that we have in North Van District. We've had an asset management program in for 15 years, so we know where we have flexibility and where we don't. But it makes sure that our infrastructure is in good shape. And so there's a lot of challenges right now associated with Metro and their budgets. They were at one point serving the local region, but in my opinion, that's turned a fair bit, and now we're literally just serving them at the end of the day.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Stewart. And just to disambiguate, Mr. Stewart, what he said, he was that the motion was made at RAC. That's the Regional Administrators Committee, and so that is the CAOs from the Chief Administrative Officers from throughout the Lower Mainland, all coming to a recommendation for Metro. So it's a significant motion in that regard. The other piece that I think should be explained a little bit is we've heard the term growth pays for growth in a few instances. Specifically, we're looking at the water rate when you hear growth pays for growth in these. So right now, as it stands, there is no DCC or development cost charge for water. And so when a new unit is produced, it doesn't in and of itself contribute to expanding the water system for it. The existing ratepayers pay for the expansion of the water system for it. And so when you're referring to growth paying for growth, they're typically talking about the water development cost charge, which I know that Metro Vancouver is in discussion on about that. The next
I think we were actually saying, I think Mr. Stewart and I said that it's actually growth is not paying for growth.
That's correct.
It is not paying for growth in the region, and current residents are paying for it, but not future. But I think one other issue that has been brought up, for years, and certainly our finance department has brought it up as well, is the concept of those of us that have large infrastructure projects, metro infrastructure projects within our borders. And, should there be a benefit to us? There's municipalities that have large sewage treatment. We've got a number of them. We've got watersheds, and we've got sewage treatment, and we've got a solid waste depot. We've got 3 major infrastructures within the district in North Vancouver, which is quite unusual. West Vancouver, for example, they don't have an infrastructure project for Metro Vancouver. So, there's a lot of things to consider as we move forward. And I think that in the new year, we should have a good roundtable discussion with council, invite Metro, have discussions about the concerns that we have with Metro, and then allow a public opportunity for comment in regards to the challenges that we face moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. The next speaker I have is Councillor Bond.
Thanks, Mayor Little. I'll keep my comments rather brief. I think part of the challenge going forward, especially with the increased costs and fees that are being levied by Metro over time, and part of the benefit that we have in the District of North Vancouver is we have taken that long-term approach over the past 15 years or so to catch up on a lot of our infrastructure backlog. I think generally across the region, perhaps even in the province and the country, we are a leader in that standpoint in recognizing that for so long, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, the taxes that have been levied on existing residents were nowhere near enough to pay for the existing replacement cost of the services and the infrastructure to support the existing residents. So I think that's a factor as well. And so with our staff working with Metro Vancouver and encouraging them to have that longer term vision, I think the costs associated with not just growth, but supporting the existing population to these higher and new standards, which I think most of us agree are necessary and the outcomes are good. I think we're going to see these kinds of costs catch up with us continually. And so I think our staff have done really well, and that's kind of the part of the presentation and the reports that we're talking about today. Our staff have done a really good job at forecasting these potential increases over a long period, 10 years, as Mr. Damlick has pointed out, so that at least in the District of North Vancouver, we're prepared to not see those 20% increases year over year, whereas we've been, perhaps in a sound financial way, saving up in advance for these known costs that we have. So I think there's definitely some kudos to go to our staff and some financial practices and best practices that can be shared and learned around the region for how to deal with these very large costs going into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Next speaker I have is Councillor Forbes.
Thank you. I would just like to say as well, the North Shore has been, or the District of North Vancouver anyway, has been financially managed extremely well. And we're very fortunate that we haven't had to deal with this type of increase in ebbs and flows before. Having said that, though, I myself, when I attended a council meeting, heard about what the expected increases were going to look like over the next 5 years. Also heard about Metro had not want to do infrastructures, but have to do infrastructures of 200, which concerned me greatly about what that meant as far as costs. The pockets of our taxpayers are, the stitching is breaking, and with everything else going up, I'm really concerned about this going forward. However, we don't have control over what they charge us other than trying to push back for better governance, better practices, and I'm all in favor of that. I would just like to say, though, I'm not quite sure what we can do about it, but I'm really concerned also about people on fixed incomes, people who have lost their jobs, people who have lost their businesses. Everything is going up, not just sewer and water, but everything. So I don't know if there's some way we can approach Metro, probably not, or anything that we can do, or we can approach the provincial government to look at some help for people that are in those situations, because these are exorbitant increases that are coming for folks that, are employed. And so for people who aren't employed for whatever reason, we need to help them. This is just, going to get worse and worse here. So I will vote in favor of this, obviously, because it's passed down by Metro and we don't have a say in this. We just have a say of where we pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Curran, your comments?
Thank you. I just wanted to compliment staff. I think it's always really helpful when we break down those percentages into what the actual rate of change is in terms of dollars. And one example is the environmental fee. If you just heard that it was a 28% increase, that would be quite shocking, but it's actually $4.10 is the difference between what it was. And so I think it's really helpful When we look at those, there's no doubt that costs are going to continue to increase. We're not even talking about climate change costs at this point. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be rough, and I do appreciate that it will be challenging for folks, and we'll have to work together on that. I just had a question because it sounds like we're doing all three, like we're doing solid waste, water, and I just wanted to ask about the change in, and I don't know if anyone here is Gavin, I see Gavin is here, to talk a little bit about the 5-year contract with Aero Transportation that our organic is changing. Is that already changed? Or when is that changing? And it says should help stabilize organic tipping fees in the coming years. I know it was going to Pemberton. Is it not going to Pemberton anymore? And where is it going?
Yeah, through your worship, that contract has been signed. That stabilizes the council members. Harvest Power was shut down, and we negotiated through Metro for all 3 North Shore municipalities and the 2 First Nations, that contract that you see there. That's for the 5 years, and we have not forgot about, that gives us the time, Councillor, to look back, as you and I have talked about, on a change around the organics and other changes we may make between now and that 5-year time frame. But that allowed us to secure that contract and secure organics within the region, and so that contract has been done. Yes.
Can you just confirm where Aero Transportation System, where is our green waste going?
It's the sea to the sky. If you're ultimately interested in the location, I can send you a map tomorrow. But it's past Squamish, is on the sea to sky corridor.
So it hasn't changed. It's just staying. It's staying where it was for 5 more years. That's what it is.
No, I just want to be clear about that. So I'm on the liquid waste committee, or sorry.
Yeah, I'm
Vancouver. So I just want to clarify that. So what happened in the contract, and I believe since the decision is done and everything, that the contract is largely public, but the partner in it had a higher score than the sea to sky route.
You're correct, Your Worship. I'm 1 step behind. I'm thinking about what's happened in the last couple of weeks because it's now up into Princeton. Correct.
But the trucking company that is coming out of Princeton was a backhaul.
Yeah.
They were already going to Princeton, and
Correct.
So because of the deadheading for half of the trips, they had a higher environmental score and a lower cost than the other one, and they were awarded that contract. So the Aero contract is out of Princeton, not out of Pemberton. Now, I understand that there have been other contracts that have been backfilled to work with the
First Nations,
the former contract holder, but
yeah.
The Aero contract is out of Princeton.
Okay, basically, Gavin's just we're gonna be talking about this.
Well, I'm looking it up now, Your Worship, and I apologize. I did have a little flip there with what happened this week with where we're headed now. Arrow's proposal ranked highest overall. The proposal had a strong technical score and ranked first. Arrow's proposing to process the organics at their compost facility in Princeton, BC. The Princeton facility is permitted under the MOI, Ministry of Environment, Exchange Strategy, Compost Facility Permitting Process. Arrow's company facility produces Class A compost with compost used for general landscaping. So as His Worship mentioned, it's up in Princeton.
And I'd be happy to brief you, Councillor Curran, if you have further questions about that contract.
Yeah, okay, we can take that offline. Thanks.
Councillor Beck.
Thank you, Worship. I guess just only partially related to the waterworks question. I had a question for staff around water metering. I know a couple of us on council have talked about it, and I'm just wondering if we would have any update on that coming, if there's going to be an opportunity to discuss that in a workshop anytime soon.
That's a timely question, I think. Mr. Joyce, we talk about the history of water metering on the North Shore and what the district has done to look at that. You're muted, sir. Mr. Joyce, you're muted. There you go.
You hear me, Your Worship?
Yes, I can.
This is an item that is before REAC and RAC right now within the region. It's been introduced around the table of the engineers, and so there's an ongoing discussion at REAC it's in the work plan for Metro Vancouver in 2022, and there'll be some pilot, as I think council know, there's quite a varied discussion throughout municipalities and different opinions on this, quite a spirited discussion around the engineers table. It should be pointed out that we do have water metering in the district. We do meter our industrial users, and it's your flat rate around a single family that is not metered. But other municipalities have moved to pilot projects for secondary suites. So there's a lot of discussion at the table. I can certainly bring a report back through our manager of utilities and give council an update on the water metering, what the timelines we expect.
Yeah, I thought I would add to that so West Vancouver has a water metering program, which I think they've had in place for about 15 years now. There is a very high initial investment of capital. And then obviously in the longer run, you can get an ROI on it. The challenge is always that there's a tremendous amount of staff time managing the contracts to each individual household on the monthly water usage. And so that's always had a high toll on it. What we instead have done is we meter at the neighborhood sort of level, and that way you can tell if there's a break in the line or outside ingress that's coming in. But that was always one of the challenges, is that West Vancouver, as much as they were able to get their water usage down on the whole, they also had a tremendous amount of costs go up for the administration internally. And our approach was instead we would meter at the neighborhood level to get that impact down and that loss down without the extra administration at the time. But Councillor Beck, the floor is yours.
No, not too much more to add to that. I appreciate that information, both from you and Mr. Joyce. I just think, every year we look at water usage in the district, and it just seems like a natural area where we could, be looking at single-family homes and usage, as these costs continue to rise. So I'll just be interested to hear more of an update, particularly, looking around the region and seeing what other municipalities are doing. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Muir, your comments? And actually,
I was just gonna add to the comments about water metering, that West Vancouver actually did talk about this at the board, and they had done a review over what happened once they put the water metering in, and it wasn't, yes, they had additional costs that they had to incur for the administration of it. Initially, the water rates or the water usage went down, but over time they returned to the same or more afterwards. So they did a study on this already. It would be interesting to actually get a copy of it. Mayor Booth spoke to it at length at one of our board meetings last year, and because we were talking about water metering, and I think it would be a really interesting document for us to get and look at. I think it would give us some advice on how to move forward or not.
Mr. Stewart, you have a comment?
Yeah, Your Worship, I was responsible for putting in water metering in West Vancouver when I was a CO there. So I'd love to have a workshop with council and explain the very many complexities that go into making that decision and what you end up getting as a result.
The wounds still exist. Is that what I'm hearing, Mr. Okay. I see no further speakers. This is on all three pieces of 8.1, 811, 812, 813. Sorry, Councillor Bond, you're on this one. Sorry about that.
I'm pressing the old button. Not the
I
know. I think the last point that I'd like to make and bring to everyone's attention, we did discuss it at the Finance and Audit Committee when these came through for our review and approval, is that for a number of years, almost a decade, the district has had and Mr. Danlett can correct me if I'm incorrect, a rate stabilization or rate rationalization program. And so a number of years ago, the district did a study that looked at how the costs of the utility rates were apportioned to the different classes, whether it's single family, multi-family, care homes, and et cetera. And we have completed the work in that study. And so one thing looking forward again, and it's similar to how we've talked about how fairness applies to the costs and who uses utilities and pays for utilities, is I know staff are looking to do an update on that study. And so that's going to be something that I think they're working towards over the next year or so to bring back for council discussion to see if, I notice right now that multifamily rates for water and sewer are approximately 85% of single family. But in a lot of jurisdictions that have done the work, such as Halifax and Edmonton, Canadian jurisdictions, that the cost associated with servicing multifamily development is a fraction of the cost of more disparate types of development. So I'm interested to see that come forward, and for staff to present that work for council's discussion.
Thank you very much. And also a good point that items 8.1, 8.2, and 8.3 this evening are all referred from the Finance and Audit Committees, where I sit with Councillors Bond and Forbes on that committee. Okay. Council, I see no further speakers, so I'm going to call the question on the motion. This is for 8.11, 8.12, and 8.13. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Council. Next item we have is item 8.2. This is the annual review of fees and charges. I see Elio Iorio and Mr. Danilton. Elio, are you going to be presenting the start of this?
Your Worship, the fees and charges amendments for 2022 for the fees and charges bylaw, which were reviewed with the Finance and Audit Committee on November 10th, proposes a 2% cost of service adjustment based upon the core price index, except where exceptions apply. To maintain price stability, the core CPI measure has been utilized as it excludes expenditures subject to sensitive temporary fluctuations such as food and energy costs. The review process incorporated detailed analysis of individual fees and charges with department managers. Through this process, fees were examined to ensure alignment with department service objectives and to ensure adequate cost recovery. With the recommended changes, revenues are estimated to increase by $370,000 at current activity levels. The bylaw fee amendments are to take effect on January 1st, 2022, and are provided tonight for council consideration.
Thank you, Elio Iorio. My motion is to move the staff recommendation. Is there a seconder for the matter? I see Councillor Kern's hand. Okay. Just my comments largely reflect the staff presentation, that this reflects a 2% increase across almost all of the categories, which is in line with our CPI adjustment for the year, and so it is should not be shocking to anyone. Some of the costs obviously are outside of that envelope because they are run under additional other policies, such as fees that are affected by library, rec centers, and other outside agencies. And most of the fees in here fall under that 2% category. And so I'll be supporting the staff recommendation. Is there, and I believe the seconder on the motion was Councillor Kern. Do you have any additional comments?
Just to add that I always go through these because I always think there's so many things that I can't believe someone came up with. But I just wanted to point out the solar voltaic panels that we reduce our electrical permit fees by 50% for the sole purpose of installation of solar panels in residential buildings. And I thought that was really cool. And I wondered how long we've been doing that and how maybe we could just promote it a bit more, because I think that that's all those incentives that we offer are really important. So I don't know if that's been there before, but it was the first time I noticed it. Thanks.
Thank you. I see no further speakers on the matter. We'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Okay. Next item up for discussion is 8.3. This is the 2021 to 2025 Financial Plan Amendment number 2. And Mr. Daniluk, do you have some comments from staff?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Since adoption of the financial plan last April, a number of changes have occurred that must now be formally adopted through a financial plan amendment. The 2021 amendment includes $12.5 million in increases to the capital plan, which are primarily related to the Linden Valley Trunk Sewer project and the Maplewood Fire and Rescue Center. The trunk sewer project is primarily funded through development. The plan also includes some minor adjustments to the operating budget, which are primarily related to the receipt of grants and other housekeeping items.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just trying to find my spot in here, Mr. Dunlop, but there was a purchase of land that was listed as Old Dollarton land purchase. Can you describe what that is and what that money was for?
Yes, I can do that. The purchase of lands in the Maplewood area were for through council direction to explore options for the use of that land in the future for potential social housing site. And those options, sorry?
The acquisition of 2 properties on Old Dollarton Road for the purposes of social housing, is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll be moving the staff recommendation. Is there a seconder on the matter? Seconded by Councillor Curran. I have no further comments. Councillor Curran, do you have further comments? Okay, seeing nothing from council. Oh, Councillor Forbes, your comments?
I just would like to make a comment that this is the package that the public receives and looks at. So going forward, I would hope that when we put in things like this Old Dollarton land acquisition for 4.9, that we have a more detailed explanation or at least a link to where members of the public could find out what that's about, because it's a lot of money and there wasn't very much explanation there for the public. Thank you.
Very much. Councillor Murray, your comments?
I would just concur that $4.9 million is a rather large amount. The lots are on the southern portion of Old Dollarton Highway. I was, I have concerns about this amount of money for those 2 lots. And I would absolutely concur with Councillor Forbes that it seemed to get buried in an amendment and was never brought forward in regards to a regular council meeting to approve it, not that I recall. So could we have comment on that?
Mr. Danilek, what's the normal process for releasing an in-camera decision such as a land purchase?
Through your worship, the comments are quite right. There should have been additional detail provided in the amendment report. It was an oversight on staff's part. The value of the lots and the potential purpose of the lots and future use should have been disclosed in the report.
Well, thank you, Mr. Danilek, for saying that, but this did come from the planning department and the land department, and this was a financial decision that council made. And then finance is asked to bring forward an amendment in order to deal with the existing budget. So I don't necessarily, I mean, I appreciate Mr. Danilek's comments, but I think that this should have been dealt with by planning and land, and there should have been a report brought forward in a regular council meeting to bring this forward to the public, instead of having the decision made in camera and then it get buried in a plan amendment 2 weeks before we break for the holidays.
And I'll take that on my shoulders, Councillor Muir. I think that we need to have a standardized way to release in-camera decisions once a transaction is completed, and I need to be working with the planning department, Mr. Milburn, to get that information out. Is the question understood, Mr. Milburn, what the concern is on this one?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much.
I would like to ask, prior to this being included, I do really feel awkward about this, Mayor Little, that it shouldn't even be at this point yet. There should have been a discussion about this being brought forward in a report. And I feel like we've skipped a step, and I appreciate you taking it, you taking responsibility for this. But it still doesn't seem very prudent that we're not allowing the community to have comment about this when we're expending such a large quantity of money. So I'm wondering if we can't remove this from the amendment and deal with this at a regular council meeting in the new year.
Well, let's be clear about what this amendment reflects. This reflects money already spent. And so removing it from the amendment, it just means that our books are inaccurate. So I don't know that that's a reasonable approach to it.
Well, then we need to have a discussion about spending the taxpayers' money without them knowing about it.
And unfortunately, that is the when it comes to purchasing property in the community, that is how it happens. It happens under Section 91 limit that causes that decision to happen in camera to avoid speculation. Once the decision is made, once the transaction is completed, then there is a public accounting for it. But the process is that the council can make purchase decisions in camera. Mr. Mills,
and I will remind council that we, when we sell a piece of property in the municipality, if we close a road and we sell a road end in addition or to add on to a development, we do it subject to rezoning. So I think the way that this was handled was inappropriate, and I think that the price was inappropriate. And I'm going
to stop you there for just a second. So in-camera decisions, we don't disclose in-camera discussions, and I would appreciate it if you wouldn't do any further comments about price, about the fees.
I didn't. Well, the price is in the council report.
Okay. Mr. Milburn, did you have a response?
Yes, Your Worship. I can note that Council had previously provided some direction to staff to bring back some land use scenarios for the development of a number of properties in the district for rental, social, and affordable housing. That was in November of 2020, resolution of Council. As we let Council know in July, we intended to bring a report back this fall, which is currently scheduled for December 13th. And within that report, various land scenarios will be presented to Council and for discussion in the regular meeting, as well as Council resolved to engage the community in a conversation about the potential development of those lands. So full information will be provided on December 13th with the opportunity for community engagement following.
Yeah, so there's a very different burden for buying land for the public benefit and selling land from the public benefit. When we sell land, we have to do a tremendous amount of public disclosure, and the process takes place very publicly. When you acquire land, the process is much more discreet because of that speculation piece, not knowing who that it's the public buying the land. And so that's the difference between the two situations. If we are selling, deaccessioning, removing land from the public, then it is extremely public. We do it with notices in the newspaper. We do it with public meetings. But acquiring land for public
between decision and tonight's meeting, there was nothing in between to discuss this purchase. And I'm very disappointed that the issue of such as land and scenarios for use of that land is being discussed on the last meeting before Christmas, which again is a typical process for the district. We don't do it in the fall, we don't do it in the spring, we do it at Christmas when people are busy and there's little time for public input. So I continue to be disappointed with the process.
Okay, well, it's entirely up to the council, the pace with which we determine a future use of that property, and that will be determined by the majority of council. Councillor Forbes, your comments?
Just to question it through you, your mayor, to Mr. Daniluk. Could you at least identify the two properties now to people who are listening or watching or will watch this later? Can you identify the location of those properties for them?
Through your worship, I don't have that information at my fingertips, but perhaps Mr. Milburn does.
Yeah, Mr. Milburn will probably have it at the ready. Mr. Milburn?
Your worship, is two parcels of land in the southeast corner of the intersection of Old Dollarton Road and Riverside Drive. Thank you.
So the first one at the corner and then the one to the east of it, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if memory serves, that means that it is now contiguous with district-owned property further to the east. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Okay. Council, I see no further comments at this time. I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Council. I'm sorry, Councillor Murray, did I see your hand go up as opposed? I apologize. I'm sorry, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm going to be against this one.
Okay, noted. Thank you very much. Okay. Sorry about that. Sometimes with the virtual screens, it's a little hard to tell when the hand is timed. Sorry about that. Okay, Council, moving on to the next item. This is item 8.4. And before I open this one, I do have a speaker lined up to speak to it. Just before I just wanted to add that some of the elements of this there was an addenda added in, again, just describing for Council's benefit. Addendas are used in these DVP situations in order to allow feedback to continue coming in on the matter. And then we use an addenda to get that last feedback out. That's the purpose of it. It's not because anything was late in the process, it's because we've allowed people to continue to comment up until the meeting time. That's the purpose of it. I do have a speaker signed up for Development Variance Permit 32.21. This is Patricia Beaton, speaking in person here. Welcome.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Honorable Council members.
Good evening. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the Council.
My name is Pat Beaton. I'm here with my husband Alan Beaton and our contractor Norm Malta. We hope to build a coach house on our property at 927 Frederick Road. We've lived there since 1986. It's a large property. We have 9,000 square feet. And the purpose of it is for us to move into the smaller house. As you can see, we're seniors, we're getting older, we need to downsize. So that's our hope, to move into the coach house, and our daughter and her husband and their 3 children will be able to move back to North Vancouver. Maura and Sean grew up in North Vancouver. They'd love to come back, but they moved out to Langley because the housing was more affordable. This gives them an affordable way to move back to North Vancouver, and it will allow us to age in place, which is a term that's bandied around a lot right now. As far as the building itself goes, the house is, it was built in the 1930s. It's the original farmhouse in the area. There was an old barn or an old garage on the property. We took it down 2 years ago because it was starting to deteriorate. We're hoping to build the coach house on almost exactly the same spot, except we've moved it over a little bit from the property line. So it won't really change the footprint of the property very much. The neighbors are all used to a building being there. So as far as the variances go, we need a height variance. You would come down a driveway right to the front door of the coach house, and you would come just to the top story. And that's where the living room and the dining and kitchen area would be. Because of the contours of our land, you will not see the bottom level because we have a hill that comes both ways. So you will only see that top story, which is about 11 3/4 or 11.78 feet high. So it's not really that high. What else did I want to say? We're hoping to make it as green as possible. We're going to try to use the step 5, which is a green way of heating homes. So that's also part of our plan. As far as parking, as I said, we have this long driveway that goes in. We've designed 3 parking spaces along behind the house, and cars will be able to come and go unimpeded. There won't be any jockeying of the vehicles. And we'll still have a large backyard for the 3 grandchildren, who I will be able to continue to help with childcare, which I do now, but I have to drive up the lane. They'll just be steps away. And as we age, we'll just be steps away from my daughter and her husband, and they'll be able to keep an eye on us without having to drive 45 minutes either way. So finally, I wanted to thank Afruz in your department. I think it's the planning department, or he's been very helpful with all of this. So I can answer any questions, or Norm can answer any technical questions if you have.
Thank you so much. Okay, and from staff, Mr. Hartford is here. Mr. Hartford, your comments on the project?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to members of council. As a bit of an overview on the application, as was noted by the speaker, Mr. Norm Maltzhead has applied on behalf of the owners of 947 Frederick Road for a development variance permit to allow construction of a two-story coach house. The proposal is to construct a 950 square foot, two-story coach house at the rear of the existing house on the site. 3 parking spaces are to be provided in the form of a single car carport and 2 surface parking stalls. The proposal requires council's consideration of 2 variances to the zoning bylaw, a variance to the coach house height regulation that arises from the change in grade across the site, and the fact that a 2-story coach house is proposed. The height variance would accommodate the coach house at 21.8 feet in height, 6.8 feet higher than the 15-foot maximum permitted in the zoning bylaw. As well, a variance to the vehicle access regulation for coach houses is required, as there is no lane located at the rear of this property and the lot is not a corner lot. Neighbor consultation took place on the proposal, and the applicant has worked to address neighbor concerns. This included increasing a side yard setback from a shared property line to 12 feet. For reference, the zoning bylaw requires a minimum side yard setback of 4 feet, so the proposal at 12 feet far exceeds the minimum requirement. As notification of council's consideration of the variance application this evening, 8 notices were sent out to adjacent residents as well as to the local community association, and no responses were received. As noted by Mayor Little, in response to council's request to be provided a summary of neighborhood notification on DVP applications, the results were provided to council through an agenda addendum that was circulated on Friday. Development variance permit 3221 to accommodate the proposed coach house is recommended for issuance this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hartford. Okay, Councillor Murray, your hand is up first, or is that from the last item? No.
No, I'd like to move this.
Okay, I'll be happy to let Councillor back second. I think you were the next up.
Thank you, Mayor Little, and thank you, Mr. Hartford, for your presentation, and thank you to the applicant for increasing that very noticeable setback to protect the privacy from the adjoining property. I think that says a lot about how we work through these and how we consider our neighbors. And so I think that says a lot. And I just wanted to add, the applicant made comment that this is a multi-generational solution to allow their children to come back to the North Shore, and them being able to be kept an eye on. My 91-year-old father lives out by UBC, and it's a bit of a drive to get to him. He needs additional care, and boy, would I love for him to be in a coach house in the backyard. So I could keep an eye on him and support him in these the sort of the twilight of his life. And so you're very fortunate. And I think when we first started the Coach House program, we were looking at a way to create revenue generators to be able to offset the costs of living in the district. And certainly the cost of a coach house is, a few $100,000. It's an expensive endeavor. And but the creativity of and this multi-generational concept is certainly a win-win in regards to these additions and gentle density in our single-family neighborhoods. And it's wonderful. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Murray. Councillor Back as a seconder, your comments?
Yes, thank you very much, Your Worship. Very supportive of this application. I'll be supporting the staff recommendation. I think across the district, it'd be great, in my opinion, to see more of this type of housing. I think coach houses serve a purpose, and it's exactly the sort of purpose that you highlighted tonight in terms of intergenerational housing, being able to stay on the property in the home that you've lived, or on the site where you've lived for so many years, and be able to welcome family back there as well. So I also think it points out to how you can use a lot in the district. We've made it easier on properties that are on a lane or on a corner lot, but lots of our properties, the majority are not. But we do have a lot of bigger lots like yours. So I think you've shown how you can do this. And to Councillor Murray's point, I appreciate the consideration you've given to the setbacks as well. I I know this neighborhood very well, so I am very supportive. Thank you very much for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Back. Comments? I've lived a few blocks away. Frederick in the 1300 block, so I know it fairly well. It's actually a very similar lot to my own lot, and with 4 teenagers, I've often thought about moving out to the garage. It seems like a reasonable thing to do. The question we have and why we don't automatically pre-zone this or allow this use automatically is because you have to sort of have the right setting for an overland route. We pre-approved it for flanking streets, corner lots, laneways, but we have still made it on a case-by-case basis for this type of overland route. With a 9,500 square foot lot, approximately, and with the wide side yard, I'd say this is an appropriate place and use for this type of facility, so I will be supporting the request. Next, I have Councillors Hanson and Bond. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I agree with the comments that have come before me. Thank you to the applicant for their very good presentation. I'm very pleased to support. We have seen a number of these types of applications where, because it isn't a corner lot, because there isn't lane access, it's come to us for approval by council, and we've had unanimous support for these types of coach houses for all the reasons that have been stated by the other speakers before me. This type of gentle densification in neighborhoods is widely supported. There's substantial neighbor support. And in this case, looking at the individual variances, I have been to the site. And with respect to height, as the applicant stated, it's the topography of the yard that creates the need for the height. And with respect to the access, there's an existing lane in place, which facilitates easy access to the coach house. So I've said before, and I will start saying again, perhaps we've reached a point where we ought to consider policy change such that coach houses of this category that are so easy to support and non-contentious can be approved without appearances before council. Thank you.
Councillor Hanson, Councillor Bond.
I'll echo the comments of my colleagues. I think one thing that's great about this housing type and your application in particular is a lot of the reasons why people stay or come to North Van is for our neighborhoods, is for our family-oriented neighborhoods, whether that's a single-family neighborhood or a multi-family neighborhood. I think in some areas we've seen over time as demographics change and as people age in place, a lot of the families, a lot of the kids tend to become missing in a lot of these neighborhoods. And we've seen that demographically across the North Shore. We have less and less younger people, less and less younger families. And so I think this is a great way to bring a lot of that family feel back into some neighborhoods and allow the people that have lived there for such a long time, that have their roots, that have their home, that have raised their families there, to share that experience with their children and their grandchildren. So very supportive of this type of housing. One question for staff, it's along the line of comments of Councillor Hanson. How much extra time does it take for a coach house application such as this to go through the additional neighborhood consultation, to work with staff to prepare a report, to come forward to council to do a development permit, say, versus the ones that have already been approved outright in the zoning bylaw?
Harper?
Through your worship to Councillor Bond, this application was submitted in June of 2021. From the time of submission until coming to council for consideration is approximately 6 months. And that time is in addition to the building permit time that would be required for an application that did not require a DVP application.
But I think I'd echo Councillor Hanson's comments that I think a lot of at least the ones that we have seen so far have met unanimous approval. But I know, at least in the community, there are many opportunities for housing like this that don't come forward because of the additional hurdle, the additional time, the additional cost of bringing such an application to council. And in the past, some of these applications have been rejected. And so, not everyone has the time or the money to gamble with a decision by council. And I think any more certainty that council can provide by creating bylaws and policies to allow more of this type of housing would be a great benefit to our community.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beck, your comments, second time speaker.
Just a follow-up comment, because I do agree with both the comments of Councillor Hanson and Vaughn. I think this is the type of thing that we should be promoting, this type of gentle density and on these types of lots. So I would also support taking a look at where we can actually make some changes to our policy to encourage more of this. And maybe we can use one of yours like as an example when it's done. But yeah, I think we should be taking another look at it to again promote more of this in our different neighborhoods.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. Councillor Murray, your comments?
I just wanted to add, just in regards to the comments from the councillors previously, that the reason that this is being supported unanimously is because of the work that the applicant did based on the concerns of the neighborhood or a neighbor. With the significant 12-foot setback. I would suggest that if you are going to allow this as an automatic, because of the loss of privacy the two-storage house can incur on a neighboring property, and if you set it in stone in regards to a policy document, then the ability for the applicant and the neighbor to be able to work through these initiatives will absolutely, and I've seen it before. We've had two-story applications come forward before based on existing regulations, and it turned into a neighborhood war. Several wars. We've had several applications that have come forward that never resulted in anything because there were some, regulations that were laid out and it wasn't going to address the issues of the neighbor. So a variance, we used to do variances a lot years ago, offered an opportunity for a discussion back and forth, finding a middle ground and allowing everybody to be content with what was going to be put on the property. And, taking that away, not allowing that discussion to go forward when there is an impact on neighboring properties, I think is a mistake.
Thank you, Councillor Murray, and reminding everyone that this person's application is not the test for the broader change in policy, but
it's the example.
We still have a couple of speaking times still coming forward. So Councillor Curran, Councillor Forbes, your comments?
Thank you. Just wanted to wish the applicant all the best. It sounds like a great project, and I just wanted to echo some of the sentiments that have been shared around streamlining this process. This application, from what I understand, the setback was 4, and so they're way beyond what is actually required within our zoning. So I think that we need to make this easier for people to move forward. It will be interesting to understand how many successful ones we've had with the streamlined approach. And does staff have that number now? Like how many since we changed the policy that went through without coming to council?
Mr. Hartford?
Your Worship, Councillor Curran, since the policy change took place in January of 2020, we have had 5 coach houses issued directly through the building permit process and 3 additional currently in process. So eventually we will have 8 issued through the building permit process. There have been 22 coach houses accommodated through the development variance permit process.
Okay. And yeah, so I would say that making it easier, and I think more broadly, like those conversations around why this is important to keep families together and why this is important to ensure that we have options for people to age in their communities, because one of the social determinants of health is sense of belonging and sense of being in the community. And I think that this answers a lot of the challenges that we have. So as much as we can streamline it, I think that's important to do. And I think there would be a lot of support for it if it's presented in a way that makes sense to everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Curran. Just checking, Councillor Hanson, you're on this list. Are you still wishing to speak a second time? Yeah.
I can be very brief. Just on the issue of the policy change, And I know there have been applications of this type denied, but I believe they were all in the last council. I don't believe that this council, to the best of my recollection, has turned down Coach House. And I think that reflects a growing sentiment in our community of support for gentle densification, for unification of families of this type. And as I say, I believe there's been broad consensus amongst this council on the applications that have come forward, certainly in this term. So it's, I just believe we should create a more streamlined process. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, your comments?
Thank you. Thank you to the applicant who made the changes. And I think this is a really good proposal and I'm in favor of it. Having said that, just as a comment back about previous councillors' comments about streamlining it, I also agree that, you know, if we can save people costs and save people time for this type of development, then we should take a look at it. But having said that, I agree with Councillor Murray that that doesn't mean that the way to do that is to not involve the neighborhood or the neighbors. So I would be willing to look at this, but it would depend on how we streamline whether I would support it or not. Because I do think there are situations where you have neighborhood wars, and that's not what we want. And this was a glowing example of how back and forth and discussion resulted in some very good results, and it became a win-win for the neighborhood and for the applicant. So I wouldn't want to see that go away. I think the neighborhood should have a say in what happens, but streamlining would be a good idea. It depends how we do it. Thank you.
Yeah, so just a handful of my own comments on the broader issue. So we have been approaching coach houses incrementally. We started off only on, as I said, laneways and flanking streets, and then large lots like over 12,000 square feet, and we've been reducing the requirements progressively, and when we get the consent of the council. I'm always reminded, though, that it's never going to be a significant source of affordable housing. The cost to produce a coach house is very high and has a very long return on investment. The places where it is most appropriate are exactly this type of situation, when someone is doing it for multi-generational housing as a priority. That's when it makes the most sense. Otherwise, it is cheaper, more environmentally friendly for us to be focused on multifamily as a source of additional housing in the community. And so while I'm more than happy to support multi-generational housing, I don't know that you can always look at it as an affordable housing lens, because it is quite expensive to produce a coach house in the current construction climate. But having said that, I do think that 6 months wait and additional time for minor concerns, I'm sure we can tighten that up to a shorter period of time. And then when the community, there's a general consensus that this size and style of overland use, so an overland lane with parking accommodated alongside the house, once people seem to accept that, then we'll move to the next stage, which will be to allow overland as a pre-approved option. So, Councillor Curran, your comments.
I just wanted to briefly mention that I have heard of studies happening around the world of stratifying to make it more affordable. So there are options that are outside of what we have now, but because I do agree that the cost can be a lot, but there are other ways that we can look at this as well moving forward. But for tonight, let's just let these folks go home and thank you. And yeah, I think it sounds like there's appetite for further discussion.
With that in mind, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for your contribution to the broader conversation as well. I wish you well. And sorry for all the construction and road traffic about a half block from your house. It's almost finished. We're getting there. We're getting there on that one. Thank you. Okay, Council, the next item that we have up is item 8.5. This is the development permit 47.20 for 600 West Queens Road. I have a speaker signed up to speak. And at this time, I don't have an indication of in-person or virtual, and I don't see Joy here. Virtual. So Joy Hayden from Hollyburn Family Services is joining us. Joy, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Joy Hayden, and I'm here on behalf of Hollyburn Family Services Society to speak in favor of our 86-unit affordable housing project at 600 West Queens Road. For the benefit of those listening this evening and who may not know who we are, since 2004, Hollyburn has supported youth, seniors, and families facing social issues in our community. And for many of the 800 individuals we support annually, their greatest need is safe and affordable housing. Mayor and Council, thank you for choosing Hollyburn to be the housing provider. We share your vision to build a beautiful, affordable housing development that fits into its natural environment, and we look forward to welcoming young people, seniors, and families into their new homes. We would also like to acknowledge and express our appreciation for your foresight to pre-zone this property. The rezoning process is daunting, and to have this completed prior to us coming to the table has saved us considerable time and money and has positioned the project to move forward quickly and smoothly. And last, Mayor and Council, I'd like to point out that since your election, in just a few short years, you have moved forward hundreds of affordable units, a supported housing development for women, and even the rent-to-own opportunities now offered in the District of North Vancouver. Very impressive, very needed. Tonight, along with representatives of Hollyburn who are on the Zoom call, we also have our architect and development consultant in attendance to answer any questions you may have. And in closing, I just want to reiterate how excited Hollyburn is to be part of this development, and clearly how excited the community is, because we're getting phone calls almost on a daily basis being asked to put on the wait list. So anybody listening, wait until construction starts and then reach out and give us a call. So thank you again, Mayor and Council and staff, for working with us on this much needed project. We look forward to your approval of the DP so we may proceed to working drawings, building permits, and the start of construction. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy Hayden. And I see your Joy advertising in the back wall behind you there. You can see my house. I have a huge Christmas display that says Joy on it. It's just for you. Come on by.
I'd love to. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Hartford, comments from staff.
Thank you, Your Worship. As a brief overview of this development permit application, Terra Special Projects has applied on behalf of the District of North Vancouver as owner of the land, Hollyburn Family Services, and BC Housing to redevelop the parking lot at this site as an 86-unit social housing rental building. The site is approximately 36,000 square feet in size. It's located at the northwest corner of West Queens Road and Stanley Avenue. Surrounding properties include a strata apartment building to the west, single-family homes to the east and south, and the remainder of the Delbrook site to the north. As background, Council adopted an OCP amendment bylaw and a rezoning bylaw to accommodate the project on November 18th, 2019. The applicant team has since worked with stakeholders and district staff on the development permit application that is before you this evening. A parallel park redevelopment process is underway for the north portion of the site, and the park design is anticipated to be completed in the first half of 2022. Demolition of the existing buildings is anticipated to begin in March of 2022, with construction of the new park and the social housing building both anticipated to begin in the fall of 2022. The project consists of 86 social housing units in a 4-story building with 1 level of underground parking. Just over 50% of the units are 1-bedroom layouts, with the remaining 50% in 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom layouts. The units are to be operated by Hollyburn Family Services. Rents are set to the BC Housing Community Housing Fund 20-50-30 model, and this means that 20% or 17 units are geared toward deep subsidy incomes, with rent of approximately $570 for a 2-bedroom unit. 50% or 43 units are geared toward housing income limits with rent of approximately $1,250 for a 2-bedroom unit. The remaining 30% or 26 units are geared toward low and moderate income limits with rent of approximately $2,320 for a 2-bedroom unit. The project has been reviewed against the applicable development permit area guidelines for form and character of multifamily housing and energy and water conservation and greenhouse gas emission reduction. The project design includes the main pedestrian entrance and access to the underground parking garage from West Queens Road. The building has been sited on the northern portion of the site to maximize sun exposure to the above grade amenity space fronting West Queens Road, and also to minimize shadow impacts on adjacent properties. To improve access to the new park, the proposal includes a new pedestrian path along the western edge of the site, connecting West Queens Road with the park area to the north. The project will meet BC Energy Step Code Level 4 with building heating from electric baseboard heaters and domestic hot water through a centralized high-efficiency gas-fired boiler. The project is also required to meet BC Housing technical guidelines, which require the building to provide a comfortable living environment, and each unit will have individually controlled heat recovery ventilation. Parking for the project includes 65 residential spaces and 9 visitor spaces in the single-level garage. The parking ratio of 0.76 residential stalls per unit complies with the parking requirements of the applicable CD 128 zone. Bicycle parking includes 150 resident bicycle spaces and 18 visitor bicycle spaces. Parking proposed exceeds the zoning bylaw requirements. Development permit 47.20 to accommodate this 86-unit social housing project is now ready for council's consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Hartford. I have Councillor Murray. Are you moving a recommendation?
Yes, Mayor Little.
Okay, and I have Councillor Hanson second. Are you seconding the recommendation? Thank you. Councillor Murray, your comment.
Yeah, I don't, all my questions, Mr. Hartford answered. Thank you, Mr. Hartford. Do we know how long the build out is on this project?
Your worship, through you to Councillor Murray, I would ask for a comment from Joy Hayden on that, if she knows the build out time. I would estimate something between 18 and 24 months, but she may have a more accurate timeline than I do.
Okay, that's a good optimistic timeline. I was thinking a little bit longer, but that's good. So I'm okay with that. The parallel process for the park, sorry, could you just tell me when that's coming back to council?
Through your worship to Councillor Murray, the park design is anticipated to be complete in March of this year. And that design would be provided to council for their review. Construction is anticipated to begin in the fall of 2022.
Okay, so the park could theoretically be finished much sooner than the completion of the building, theoretically.
It would be expected that the park construction would be complete before the building construction is complete.
And are we giving any assistance to the programs that are renting out of the current, of the old Delbrook School in regards to new homes for them? Can we talk on just the displacement of those organizations that are so critical to the community?
Your worship, Councillor Murray, I don't have details on that. I can only offer that each of the existing tenants have indicated that they will be vacating the site in January of 2022. I don't know if Mr. Milburn might have some additional information on that.
Mr. Milburn?
They are all social community groups, and I really hope that we give all assistance that we can to support them and to, I mean, the accessibility to the building and to the parking. I mean, I've been up to family services a few times over the last few weeks, and the parking lot's always full. There's so many people that are accessing the program, seniors, with the seniors program, or CAP Community Services, which is going to be moving down to lower CAP shortly. But certainly North Shore Family Services, it's just an incredible program. And then of course the Red Cross, and the great, the logistics of the area is so great, because you could just sort of pull in, walk in, grab the equipment that you need, and then get out of there. And I really hope that we are able to help them relocate into an accessible place so they can continue this important work.
Councillor Murray, Mr. Milburn, you had a response?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, all excellent points made by council. We are working very closely with our tenants on ensuring that the relocation and closing of the existing facility happens in a way that's sensitive to their timing needs for relocation. So, and we can provide an update to council as changes occur. Thank you.
Mr. Milburn. Next speaker I have is Councillor Hanson, the seconder on the motion.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to begin by thanking everyone who has been involved to this point in advancing this important proposal to this stage. I'm pleased to support and indeed second the motion for the issuance of the development permit on this site. The proposal has been stated, will result in the development of 86 units of social housing, all badly needed in our community. And this is an example of a partnership between Hollyburn Family Services, BC Housing, and the district. And I'd like to specifically thank our partners. I acknowledge that the path to this stage of this development has been challenging. This council has had to make difficult decisions, balancing diverse community interests. In this proposal, I believe we have got that balance right. The proposal offers significant affordability. 17 units has been described of deep subsidy, 43 units at the housing income limits. The result of this will be rents significantly below the DNV medium rents. I believe at this stage, the community consultation leading us to this point has been thorough. And I note that plans are underway for the construction of the long-awaited neighborhood park on this site. I will acknowledge that concerns remain. There is still a concern about massing and the size of the building. And there's a concern about our failure to incorporate the much needed respite care on the site, which obviously was a community amenity that would be of great benefit. However, I believe that we can be proud of the use that we are putting to this district land, we are putting this district land to, and that we have arrived at the right place with respect to 600 West Queens and our development on that property. Again, I'd like to thank our partners, and may this be one of many more partnerships of this type in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Hanson. Just some of my own comments on this. Once again, I'm glad that we were able to pre-zone the property so that the applicant didn't have to go through the public process that they would have. Although in this case, that was one where largely that process had already started under the old system. But going forward, I think it's still strategically advantageous for the council to be the one to take district-owned land through the rezoning process to deal with the issues of access, egress, massing, form, and all of the impacts that the neighborhood wants to talk about first through our own zoning process, and then bring the partners on so that they can talk about all the amazing things that they get to do in the community with the space. I'm glad that that has worked out well here. I will just say, I have met with the leadership of the Delbrook Community Association, and I just checking in with Mr. Milburn, I hear the planned schedule for the park plan to be completed about 4 or 5 months from now. Have we been engaging the Delbrook Community Association along the way? That was one of our commitments at the time, was to do a parallel planning process that involved the community association for that space.
Thank you, Worship. I believe the Parks Planning team has. I'm not sure if Mr. Joyce is still on the line. His team is responsible for the Parks Planning efforts. We're, of course, coordinating with them in relationship to the interface. Staff are just advising me, yes, that the Community Association has been engaged in several meetings with Parks.
Good to hear. Thank you very much. Councillor Bond, your comments.
Thank you, Mayor Little. I'm also happy to see this project at a state where we can have the permit approved and hopefully move to construction relatively soon. I do have a few questions, perhaps of staff or the applicant. I wonder what the current, how much funding has been awarded from BC Housing towards this project, and what's the current estimated cost of construction of the rental building?
We have those numbers, Mr. Hartford?
Your Worship, I will have to ask Joy Hayden if she has that information available.
Yeah, keep Miss Hayden on the call. Miss Hayden, can you hear me? I think the question is, how much money is BC Housing assigned to this project, and what will the cost of the building approximately be?
There we go. So the overall project, including land value and other in-kind costs, is roughly 34.4 million. The straight construction and design costs are about 25 million, keeping in mind the cost of materials fluctuate, so that can change on any given moment. BC Housing, aside from the district's contributions, BC Housing is providing a grant for roughly $10 million, and the remaining will go towards a 35 low interest mortgage.
Very much. Councillor Bond?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would like to point out is that when this proposal was first rejected, I think there was an idea that somehow there could be a win-win-win with the neighborhood. And in reviewing the feedback, the neighborhood feedback from this proposal, it's clear to me that all of the neighbors that came out and were opposed to the original project when it was first proposed are still opposed to this project for the same reasons. There's comments in the public input about opposition to the project due to height, concerns of the behavior of the people who live there, when they'll work, how much noise they might make, preference for either fewer people to live there or to live somewhere else, perhaps or preferably on the outskirts of the city where their existence wouldn't inconvenience the lifestyles of those who own the homes nearby. And the lights of the tennis courts being shaded did come up again in these comments. So I think the costs of delay, in this case, at least a 10% increase to the cost and construction of the building, probably about 600 person years of housing for those in need, and for accounting a 3-year delay in an affordable housing project being constructed on this site. I think those are real considerations for council. And I'm glad that this council has decided to move forward with this project, even though without the seniors' care and at a much longer timeline than the previous one. And I'm also pleased that this council has decided to approve a number of the other affordable housing projects that were in the pipeline. But I think these rising costs and these timelines just speak to our need to do a lot more. And I hope that this council, now that the majority of the affordable housing projects that the last council put into motion are being at their stages of being approved and completed, that this council will then choose to do the same thing and set up the next council for a number of successes that we are currently seeing right now.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Curran.
Oh, I'm just going to lower my hand. Oh, I did lower my hand. Thank you, Joy, for presentation and for really being patient as a new councillor coming on. I think a steep learning curve, and I appreciate what I've learned and am quite humbled. But I'm excited to see this moving forward, and I I'm glad to see that we do have this. I know we've talked so much, but it is a net zero energy ready building at step 4. It's the highest level in the BC step code. And I think the goal behind that is to solve multiple problems. And so I know in the beginning it seemed like it was one or the other, and I'm just saying for everything it has to be both. Like, we face a housing crisis and we face a climate crisis, and so how can we address those? And reflecting on the heat dome event of the summer, the people who died in their homes, and so the people who will be most impacted by that are people who maybe find themselves in situations that don't have social supports, that are living on lower incomes. And so I want people to be safe and healthy for a long time. The rents are incredible to see. I'm so excited to have these, the rate, although I've heard from people that those rates are way too low for people. So that's a provincial issue that we'll continue to address. But I learned a lot through this process. I agree it's not perfect, but I think for the folks that are going to be moving into this building, and it's going to be a great home, and I really can't wait for it to be done. I wish it could be done faster. Thanks.
Councillor Kern. Councillor Back, your comments?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and nice to see you, Joy. Thanks for your words there, and hope you're doing well. Of course, I'm supportive of this project. Acknowledging Councillor Hansen's comments, it's been a bit of a rocky road, to say the least, to get here with lots of delay. Unfortunately, it was one of the decisions of this council, and it's hard to believe that was 3 years ago. You know, I think this is the site for affordable housing, and I think this is going to be a development that as a community we can be very proud of. It is unfortunate that it's not going to have the respite care. You know, we lost a couple of partners there that are going to be doing something great in the city with the new North Shore Neighborhood House build out, but and the respite care that'll go there. But just the same, it is moving forward, and you know, we'll have the park happen as well. So lots to be supportive of here, and I'm just glad to see that it's finally moving forward in some form.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. And Council, I see no further comments. I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Good luck with your project. Okay, Council, the next item is item 8.6. This is the final report from the Rental, Social and Affordable Housing Task Force. This is staff responses to the recommendations. And I have Ms. Atva is going to be making some comments, and I just, you know, from talking to people in the community leading up to this, and particularly members of the Housing Task Force, they seem to have a particular interest in specific dates when actions are going to take place or when policy changes are going to be taking place. So, Ms. Atva, as you go through your presentation, I don't know, any specifics you can add along the way would be appreciated.
Great, thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor Little, members of council, and community members and staff who are here tonight. Yes, we are here this evening to give you staff's response to the Rental, Social and Affordable Housing Task Force final report and recommendations. You'll recall it was 2 months ago at the end of September when the task force presented at a workshop their report. What we've done since that time is really take a good look at all of the recommendations, and there are more than 60 recommendations and amazing ideas that they put forward. What we really wanted to do and felt we had to do was look at them really closely and prioritize their suggestions so that we could really better ourselves to continue to respond to the housing crisis. We also wanted to know that, or wanted to see where the task force ideas aligned with other council directions and policies. For example, top of mind, the official community plan, action plan. We felt that this would let us be strategic with our resources, with the district resources, tie into some of the work underway, some of which are also work from the task force interim report from last year. So I'm happy to be joined tonight to give you a short overview. I'm going to turn it over to M.A. Lee for a couple minutes and then I'll come back. And I'll also note that Josh Cairns, the staff liaison to the task force, is also here for questions as we move forward. Thank you, M.A., with your worship's permission.
Thank you. Unfortunately, you're muted, even though the Zoom system doesn't say you're muted, so you might want to check your headset.
Test, test.
How about that? That sounds better. Oh, it's gone.
Testing again.
Yes? And no.
Third time charm.
We can hear you clearly as soon as you touch it, and then 10 seconds later, we can't hear you at all. Nope, can't hear you. Ms. Atva, have you got any more comments? We can give Ms. Lee an opportunity to adjust her technology.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Maybe Ms. Lee can maybe take off her headphones. So the report before you outlines a number of tables with how our analysis took place. And I really appreciate the comments that we've heard over the last few days from the task force members in particular. So first off, we proposed high priority actions, and these are 6 group actions, and together they actually make up a large proportion of the task force individual recommendations. So these are the ones that we think are more immediately actionable, housing related work, and really have the potential to move the dial more quickly. So for example, pre-zoning of sites, Riverside being one that's been before council, that we know can help us secure more non-market housing. We also could look more strongly around policies around replacement rental housing. This was an area where the task force had a number of recommendations. Another high priority action could be more engagement with the community, particularly with residents who are typically underrepresented in decision making. I know that Ms. Lee and staff spent a lot of time and found value in all of the task force recommendations, and found that we could tie a large number of them into these 6 high priority areas. The report also outlines 8 areas where there is work already underway. And as I mentioned, some of these were work or ideas, recommendations that the task force mentioned back last year. One of them, rental tenure zoning. We are moving forward on that with looking at options and some financial analysis. And we expect to come back to council, come back to you in 2020. Also work related to inclusionary zoning. That is, can we find a way to require a certain amount of affordable or rental housing in all multifamily developments? We'll be coming back to you with that in the near future. There are also a number of items, I think it's 9 items for future consideration. These are ones where we really had to look at what was viable, what was feasible. Some of them, for example, were in areas where we have less jurisdiction or no jurisdiction. Others are ones where we really want to monitor and lobby, continue to through UBCM or FCM, where we can move some of those recommendations along. So this is part of the reason for the grouping, if you will. And finally, there are 8 task force recommendations that we see as really having made a lot of progress, some of them completed. The housing planner, and I'm sure Emmy's disappointed she's not able to speak at the moment, but hopefully the mic will come on for questions shortly. Also work that's been completed around the tenant relocation assistance policy that council saw last spring. So for these, we anticipate really the work involved would be more implementation and monitoring and reporting. So this is what brings us to you for the recommendation before you today, which is really to focus on those proposed new actions detailed in the report. We anticipate that these will be implemented over varying time horizons, and some of the timeframes, Your Worship, relate to work that is tied in, for example, or nicely tied in with some of the ongoing work around rental tenure zoning, short-term rentals, items that will come back at different points in the first half of 2022. I also say that we will track progress and look for synergies with other work that council has directed staff to do. And just to finish up, I really appreciated getting to know the task force members. It was one of the first things I did when I started here. I appreciated hearing their perspectives. They did have a lot of good debate. I look forward to seeing how some of the change that they're looking for, subject to council's further directions. So staff are available, Your Worship, to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're looking for direction from council on this. Okay, I'll be moving the staff recommendation. Is there a seconder on the matter? Councillor Hanson, thank you very much. Yes, so I think that this has been a very productive process. Very early on in the term, we decided that we definitely had some gaps we needed to fill, and we had to create a committee to make some recommendations on it. We have already been able to address a number of issues, or at least start to address a number of these issues through some changes in policies that we have had, but we obviously have a lot of work still to do to implement these issues. It will be up to the council to really set the timeline for that in our work plan, but it does sound like some of the items are progressing for the first half of this next year, and but it'll be up to the council really to determine when those policy initiatives get council time and get prioritized, and we'll have to work together with staff with the work plan in order to be able to address those issues. I wish I had more concrete times and dates and milestones to share on some of those elements, but at this point we are going to have to go back with our staff and work through our work plan and see what we can achieve in the near term, ideally before we get to the next election, and have to educate a new crop of mayor and council on these matters. So I believe Councillor Hanson, you second in the matter. Do you have further comments?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the members of the task force, and I'd like to acknowledge the deep expertise and commitment of this group. I know the number of meetings that were held and the diversity of expertise that they brought forward. I regretted that the names of all of the task force members were not listed in the report. I thought that was an oversight. Perhaps they were being modest. Of course, the report makes important observations as to our failure to fulfill our 2011 OCP goals regarding housing diversity. Equally, the 2016 rental, affordable, and housing strategy has failed to achieve the required changes in priority. Big picture, there's been too much expensive market housing and too little of everything else: rental, affordable, social housing. And this report provides an important set of recommendations that, if implemented, can assist us to provide a better housing mix in the district. Some of these recommendations, as Mayor Little has noted, is already underway. And as a council, we need to commit to making these recommendations a priority. This represents a long-term vision to a sustainable path towards better housing diversity and a more balanced community. I endorse the high priority actions in Table 1. I was interested in the comment about having a housing dashboard, because I can say even persons such as myself who have intense ongoing involvement in this process, it's useful to have that kind of simplified data made available to us so we know where we stand. I support council holding itself to specific timelines, and I support us being held accountable for the progress of these priorities as set out in this task force report. And again, I'd like to thank all of the members of the task force and personally commit to see the fulfillment of the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Next speaker is Councillor Forbes.
Thank you. I would just like to say, I've said it before and I'll say it again, that, you know, the dedication of this task force, the expertise, the depths and lengths to where they went to get information and then fitting all the pieces together again was excellent. So again, thank you to the task force.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes.
Sorry. I didn't mean to shut that off. I just want to repeat some things that have been said to me by members of the task force, just for to be noted, and hopefully for council maybe to move on a couple of them. Most of the people that contacted me said that this staff report was basically the same as their report. It was just turned around and moved around a little bit, but it was basically the same report. the important thing that they wanted, one of the important things that they wanted was they wanted tracking of the system to know how the bedrooms, the actual number of bedrooms that were being built in the units. And then they wanted to know how the district was going to track their recommendations going forward and track how well we're doing against that. So I think that's something that staff and council need to talk about, that we need to have some kind of tracking mechanism and we need to make it available to the public. That was a couple of things they mentioned. And the other thing I would support totally is they had recommended an ongoing committee, not necessarily the same people, or definitely not the same people. I'm not sure if some would want to come back, but they're not saying not continuation of this task force. They're saying a standing committee, housing committee, to sort of deal with that kind of information and report back to council as well. So I think that's something that council and staff need to discuss, if we should have a housing committee that manages to do these things and keeps track of where the district's going and sort of nudges us if we start going off course or we're not staying on course. So my recommendation would be that we have one of those committees. But again, thank you to staff for all their work on their report. And thank you for the task force. I think we really, really needed it, and we got valuable information, and we need to use it and move forward as fast as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Kern.
Thanks. Thank you to staff and to the volunteers who spent a lot of time working on this very complex issue. I just wanted to get I just had some questions for staff in about timelines. I think Mr. Vilmard mentioned that Councillor Bond's report will be coming back to council December 13th. Is that accurate? Or a response to the report?
Mr. Vilmard?
That's correct, Your Worship. Staff provided an update to council on, I believe it was July 19th of this year, that included a summary of the various housing programs and where they were at in the approval chain. If needed, I can share that with my screen, but essentially staff are working on this fall a number of items that council had previously identified as direction, and we'll be bringing that information back in the spring. And as Ms. Adva mentions, there are a number of different of course, initiatives such as the dashboard and other things that staff will be bringing back for council consideration at various timescales. We can't do everything at once, and so we have to, and that was why staff wrote the report the way they did. They want to be recommending to be very strategic so that we can achieve it as the really key important things in a timely way with council direction.
Okay, thank you for that. I just saw that as being, because I think what we're hearing from everyone is they want action and accountability to reaching these targets. So I noticed that table 2 is indicating actions that are underway. I know from my perspective, the residential zoning, if that's listed as action 2, do you have an anticipated timeline of when that will come back? When I travel throughout the community and you see older, which we don't have a lot of, but when you see older purpose-built rental buildings that are especially close to or in a town or village center, I worry about, folks that are in there for, and I'm just wondering when that tool will be explored or when that report back is expected on that specific policy.
Your Worship, to Councillor Curran, we previously indicated to council that we would start that work this fall and we'd be coming back to council with an update in the spring. So that's our anticipated timeline. In the meantime, council, of course, we do have affordable zoning and tenure control through housing agreements. So whenever you see those rezoning reports come forward and there is any kind of affordable component within them, then a housing agreement bylaws is typically attached to that discussion. And that is how the district and other communities control tenure through the rezoning process. What council is looking for was what are other options outside of the rezoning process, possibly to deal with existing rental units in the community. And so we do anticipate coming back this spring to provide options for council to consider.
Okay, and as far as something else that's been tossed around a bit is the CAC allocating a percentage of CACs every time to our affordable housing fund so that it grows over time. Would that require a specific council motion, or what would you see as the process for that? Or is that something that staff is already planning to report back on? I know that the report this evening actually gives us an update of what has been contributed. But yeah, just looking for a little information on that specific policy.
Thank you, Worship. Staff are working with external consultant support on urban economics and land use economics to bring back some advice for council on the future of the CAC program, including the financial analysis that Councillor Curran is requesting. Similar time frame, we're looking to come back to council in the spring with an update. Council will recall we have provided information in the past about, I believe at a workshop we presented options for council with respect to what that could look like in terms of amount of CAC contribution. So staff are here and willing and able to provide advice to council, and we will be bringing the information back in the spring of 2022.
Okay, thanks. And just echoing what Councillor Forbes mentioned, the bedroom mix, I do think that's important when we're talking about units. Sometimes we don't know if we're replacing a certain unit mix and ending up with a different unit mix. So I just wanted to get clarification if staff was also, I thought this was underway, but like the inventory, so that we are like, this is the state of all of the existing rental, social, and affordable housing in the municipality. Did I make that up? Did I dream that report, or is that something with the unit mix, that so we understand exactly what we have now? Is that?
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Curran. Ms. Adfa may be able to comment on the timeline of that analysis of existing properties. I can say that the analysis has already been done in terms of properties and the rezonings that council has approved since 2011. That information is on our website. If you search multifamily statistics, you'll find a web page on the DNV website, which has a breakdown of the units approved by council to date by bedroom type. And so council can see those decisions and their impact. In terms of an assessment of the existing community, I believe Ms. Atfa could possibly provide an update with respect to the timing of that work. You are not dreaming it, Councillor Curran. We are working on that as well.
Thank you very much. Just to add a little bit there, Mayor Little, to Councillor Curran. Yes, part of the dashboard idea to have information, housing related information, easy to understand and publicly accessible, will include information on bedrooms. We do collect that through our permit tracking systems, but of course they're not the public facing elements. We also know through the housing needs report that one of the pieces of data we have to show and estimate are housing types, and in that context it really means number of bedrooms. And you'll recall scenarios around how many one bedrooms do we think we'll need over time, and the presentation of 2 different scenarios. That final housing needs report will be coming back to council December 13th as well, if all goes well, and we are hoping that it does. But yes, the tracking of bedrooms is very important to the housing task force. You know, a number of their actions relate to replacement housing, and bedrooms like for like units are part of the policy areas also that are recommended in table 1 priority actions to move forward on first.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that, you know, overall, the things that I always look for are starting with like, what are the outcomes we want to achieve? And we want this equitable, sustainable. I think every OCP says the same thing, like where you want to get to. And then what are the actions and policies specifically that are going to get us there? And then what are the indicators that we're using to see how we're doing on that? So it sounds like that dashboard is like my dream, because it's going to be able to see that. And I think one of the things I've learned and just reflecting is, yes, of course, we're not going to be able to do all the things, but I think there is a lot we can do. And I thank Councillor Bond for bringing that report forward that allows us to look at things a bit more systemically and to figure out like, okay, this place might be good for this model. And this is what it's going to achieve, and like understanding that we have the spectrum of need in our community, and just reflecting on what Julia mentioned about that acute need right now that's growing in our community for people who are experiencing housing insecurity or are not adequately housed right now. So the other piece I just wanted to throw out, although it's not in here, but it's just top of mind as Silverland and some of these aging BC housing and other projects have come up, is the idea of retrofits and how we're going to move forward to make sure that these places are cared better. I know that's not typically a municipal jurisdiction, but it's our neighbors, and when we see our neighbors living in conditions that we don't accept, sometimes it does come back to us to do as much as we can. So I know staff's been working on that. Yeah, just I didn't see anything specifically. I know that there was work around building resiliency for changing climate. There wasn't anything specifically mentioned around that, but I imagine that that's just going to be part of it because it is a lens that we use. So I just wanted to call that out. And then the only other policy that I feel like has been talked about, but I don't believe, and I could be wrong because there's a lot of policies that we look at, is around Airbnb or that. And it sounds like that's maybe spring as well as the plan for that policy to be reviewed. Is that correct? Okay. I'll leave it at that. Thanks everyone.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next speaker is Councillor Back.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Curran covered a couple of my things, especially short-term rentals was one of the questions I was going to ask. So I'm glad that that's coming back. It sounds like we're going to have a lot of these things to look at early in 2022. But I just wanted to add my thanks to the members of the task force for all of the work, 2 years of work that they put into putting this report together and all of these recommendations. As Councillor Forbes highlighted, I just want to reiterate as well that we want to make sure that their work is being valued and treated with the sort of urgency that it should be, given the sort of housing crisis that we are in. So we don't want this to become, the type of report that ends up sitting on a shelf somewhere. We really do want to continue to move forward and find those recommendations where we're all, or at least the majority of us, I think all of us will be aligned on and move forward on those. So I think I'm looking forward to some of these things coming back early in the new year and being able to provide some regular updates so that members of this task force feel like their work was appreciated and valued by this council. But again, thank you very much to all of the members of the task force and all the staff time that went into this. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Back. Councillor Forbes, your comments?
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that a member of our community, I believe it was two members of our community have done dashboards and offered them up to staff. And so I don't know if that would save any time for staff, that if they got a dashboard that was at least built. One of them was from Dr. Cost and one of them was from Peter Tevan, and I know that Peter Tevans did show number of bedrooms, and he is consistently keeping that up to date. So that might be two people that staff could maybe approach and see that they've already got. They took the staff's stats and they put them in their spreadsheets. So that might be an idea for staff to get a hold of those two people, and maybe there can be some conversations there. Thank you.
Councillor, Mr. Stewart, a response?
Yeah, just quickly, Your Worship, staff are working on a project which will incorporate the long-term financial plan as well as the OCP goals, as well as some of the work we do with the annual report. We've identified a dashboard that will work for that, and so we look forward in 2022 to reviewing that with council. Thank you.
Mr. Stewart? Councillor Bond, your comments?
Thank you, Mayor Little. And one question for staff is, I noticed in this report that staff has summarized the actions in kind of 3 different areas. And I'm wondering, due to the number of actions and the amount of consecutive work that's going on right now, if staff would find it valuable for council to prioritize any of the actions. I think of the discussion around CAC policy and directing CACs to an affordable housing reserve, or a portion of them. But I question the need for that right now when there's, you know, 3, perhaps 4 members of council who may not vote in favor of any market development, and therefore there may not be any CACs. So that might not be the best use of council's and staff's time at this time to discuss policies that are going to, in effect, have no outcome. So I'm wondering if there's areas from staff's perspective where, as we've done in previous, as for other previous council priorities, areas where council has a majority agreement on the direction for some of these staff efforts and these initiatives, whether we need to test that, maybe not in this meeting, but maybe in a subsequent meeting, and where council's view in moving some of these issues forward is. Because I think it's good to see them here in the report. There's a lot of detailed ones that I know we've discussed either through workshops, which I don't think there's clear council direction to move forward on. And so I think it would be useful if we're looking for results, if we're looking to do things quickly, that we have a process to prioritize the ones where there is majority of council agreement, so that staff are not spending their time working on initiatives that will eventually not lead to an outcome. You know, the CAC one is I think a clear example. If no market housing projects get approved, we don't have CACs. Why would we spend staff time on CAC policies if we're not approving market housing projects? That's one example. So maybe a staff comment on whether it's valuable for council to prioritize these actions to actually get results.
Okay, Mr. Milburn, a response? You're muted, sir.
Sorry, I thought I'd hit that. Thank you. So we absolutely will have ongoing conversation with the council around prioritization. I think staff would universally agree that the development of district lands is the highest priority conversation that should occur at this stage, given that the majority of the housing sites that were initially negotiated under the BC Housing MOU in 2018. Majority of those have received direction from council. And so it's really timely from staff's perspective to focus on the land discussion, which, as I mentioned, is coming back to council on December 13th. That's the beginning of a conversation. I anticipate that won't be the end, but some direction on which lands for what type of housing, what density would be a very important conversation that will lead to the next conversation, which would be around partnerships and obtaining grants and rezoning properties in advance of those grants being received. Thank you, Worship.
Thanks, Mr. Milburn. And one other question, or maybe it's another comment on the report. And I think it's important to spend our time and effort in the places that it's going to be most effective, and to use the information that we do have and the information that's been requested in order to reach the outcomes that we desire, like Councillor Curran said. So when we're looking at needs for housing, I think we should be looking at our demographic data and not perceived needs. I know we talk a lot about number of bedrooms, and the perception is that 2 or 3 or 4 is more needed and more desired, but the demographic data shows that not necessarily. That's not necessarily true. You know, of the 31,000 households in the district right now, only 3,000 of them are 1 bedrooms, and yet we're getting closer and closer to having the average number of people in a household being 2. And so I think we should be using the demographic data and the information that we have available to us through the census and through other forms, through BC Stats, to help inform the need. I think staff have done that through the housing needs report partially, but I don't think we should be spending a lot more effort chasing perceived needs when we have a lot of the data available to us through readily available sources.
Councillor Bond, Mr. Milburn, a further response?
I think a lot of that was commentary, and I didn't have here a specific question, but certainly over time, we will continue to come back to council and seek priority direction. The conversation we've tried to include tonight around mentioning priority items coming out of the task force recommendation is to help that conversation. And if council wants to provide further direction to further specify a narrower limit of things that council wants to see within a specific time frame, we're happy to receive that direction at this time or a future date.
Thank you, Mr. Milburn. Councillor Muir, your comments.
Well, you got to ask yourselves why there's such a flurry of concern coming from the task force in regards to this report. I talked to some members today. There's been sort of a series of letters and emails, a presentation tonight. Sadly, we weren't able to hear the entire thing. It was emailed to us. And you really got to ask yourselves, the task force spent, an enormous amount of time, beyond many regular committees, committing to a work schedule because of the timing that we allowed for them to do this work. And they are, I think, not thrilled with the report the way it stands. On page 9 of the report, timing and approval, and I think this is part of the criticism. I think Ms. Fagerlund talked about an action plan, growth equaling affordability, and the data. Councillor Bond talks about the data. It was something that the task force struggled to acquire the data. And the existing data that we've got, we're waiting for the census result to come out in the new year. We don't have all the information in regards to the current census. The census that we've been working on is old, and there's certainly been a lot of change since the last one. But the timing and approval process, and this really concerns me. Pending council direction, staff are prepared to begin implementation of the proposed high priority actions summarized in Table 1. I would say if we sat down with the Housing and Affordable Task Force and Council, I think Councillor Bonds suggested this, and I agree, and look at priorities, it would be a very different list than the high priority action items that have been suggested in the first table. These actions will be implemented over varying time horizons. What does that mean? Depending on complexity, resources, and potential synergies with other initiatives. Actions for future consideration summarized in Table 3 may be monitored by staff and reassessed in the future. It's so vague and so, the uncertainty is just all over that statement that this will, as Councillor Back may fear, wind up on a shelf. We're in this predicament because we prioritized market condos for 10 years. That's why we're in this, because we displaced families from housing. Because market condos were what we were after. And there's a plethora of 1-bedrooms everywhere. We are close to 7 years talking about Airbnb, and we still haven't landed on any policy changes in regards to short-term, to support short-term rentals, and to also allow a broader base of affordable rental, which is what really originally secondary suites were considered. So I cannot believe that the data, and it's rental data, but it's a whole bunch of other data too. It is, what is the housing mix in the district? How many bedrooms are there? Rental market. We allow market to be rented. We don't restrict that. We allow it. It's against our policy to restrict rentals and strata. So we should be looking at the data, should be the number one thing. And, they talk about an action plan and a timeline. Instead, we talk about, this will happen over varying horizons. What does varying horizon mean? Like next year, the year after? This committee, this task force was a task force of council. It was not a staff committee. It was a council task force. We asked them to do work, and we asked them to come and present. And now staff have, put forward what staff believes is going to work. But I think we haven't really been able to give any input on the priorities that mean something to council based off the work that was done by the task force. This seems like we're in the same place as we were the last time this was presented. I think this is the third time, and I don't really feel like we're any further ahead. There's lots of talk about rezoning district land. there's, but we have district land in town centers, and I don't suspect that that's going to be part of that discussion. I would love for it to be, because we have very little affordable housing in our town centers. In fact, in Lower Cap, we have none. So I just think that we need more work on this. And I think that the task force, we should re-engage with the task force, and there certainly should be a committee that follows the implementation of these recommendations, instead of just allowing them to be driven by current OCP staff recommendations based on developments that are coming forward, and not really I can't believe that we're prioritizing communication with the community and reaching out to people about affordable housing. Don't we already know that we have people that were displaced because of market condos, that they still don't have secure housing? I mean, that's why we have been approving these purpose-built rental projects. So now we're going to go out and spend time doing that again. And I have to say, we're not great communicators. We're not great at communication. So I don't know why we would spend time on that. I think we already know the answers to those questions. That's why we put a task force together to bring forward recommendations so we could make changes going into the future. I'd like to see that data. That data needs to be the #1 priority. And it was something that the task force was very, very firm on. And it should be the #1 priority, and we should throw resources at it to get it done. And that will guide us going into the future.
Councillor Mary, your 6 minutes is up. Okay, Mr. Milburn, you had a response?
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to note a couple of things. I really want to commend staff. They literally responded to hundreds of questions from the task force with respect to data and provided answers to the task force. So I just want to provide that clarity. I personally presented to the task force 2 or 3 times on various aspects, including community amenity charges, etc. And many staff committed hundreds of hours to that time. So I really want to commend the task force really diving deep into this issue. And I certainly think staff was right along there with them. In terms of council priority directions on housing for the last year, council has asked staff to bring back a targeted review of the official community plan, which was done, including the consultation. Council asked staff to come back with revisions to the residential tenant relocation assistance policy, which was done, and that was recommended from the interim report of the task force. The task force final report and the review in support of the task force was a big part of our priority over the year. Additionally, a housing needs report, which was a condition of the provincial government, that was brought forward by staff, and then the final report is due to council this month, in December. And as mentioned in July, staff are focusing on bringing back information this spring on residential renter tenure zoning, as mentioned earlier tonight, the financial analysis for affordable housing and short-term rental policy. And what we're talking about now is council, significant work has been done with council's direction. Staff continue to faithfully implement that direction of council. And if it is helpful, possibly an update to the housing program describing for council how those recommended targeted actions that staff have in tonight's report could be brought back to council in what general time frame. So the quarter in which we think we could bring that work back to council. The reason why we've recommended a certain list of priority items is because we think dedicated resources need to be applied to move these items forward, and we feel we can do that, including continuing to provide update on the data and providing a dashboard for council. So we can come back to council with more information with some anticipated timeframes to supplement the information already provided to council tonight. Thank you.
Mayor Little, I think there needs to.
Thank you, Ms. Okay, Councillor Mary, you're muted.
I've just unmuted myself. I'd just like to refer it back to a workshop to talk about council's priorities.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm going to continue on with the council discussion, my comments. First, I want to pass on my appreciation to staff for their reporting, and also to the members of the task force for all of the work that they did along the way. Certainly took a very active personal interest in the matter. But I also need to say The task force has run its course. It has completed its work and done a very fine job of completing its work. And the terms of reference came to an end. If the council wishes to create a new committee that monitors the ongoing impacts of the social and affordable housing, we can have that discussion. But at this point, the task force has completed its duties. We have to, their final report has been in, their final report has been removed. We can't always constantly be reviewing the final. There has to be a terminus here. There has to be a completion of the terms of reference on that project. There have been a lot of really great comments by council about what really led us into the situation. And I'll go back even further. I think that the biggest issue we had in the community was that for a 17-year period, there wasn't a single purpose-built rental building built in the district. And so nothing was aging during that time. So in addition to the period that Councillor Murray mentions of 10 years of largely market strata-driven development in the community, there was just no purpose-built rental housing being built. And I said it's been a priority of this council to identify purpose-built rental projects and to carry them forward. I did have a conversation with several members of the task force over the last couple of days, and I will say that one characterized what we've done as low-hanging fruit. And I'm going to have to reject that notion and say that, as you're going to see in the next report, $86 million of commitment from this council towards the goals of social and affordable housing, creation of the RTRAP, creation of a staff level position that was going to specifically address the issues. Those are not low-hanging fruit. Those are significant steps towards changing towards creation and maintenance of social and affordable housing in our community, which represents the priorities that this council has set. As it pertains to the time and our work plan, the council sets the time and the work plan. And staff have some question marks in the timeline, largely because it has to fit in with our work plan. And so if the council wants to readdress the priorities and put more items into the work plan.
Mayor, a little point of order.
Sorry?
How much time do you have left in your?
I actually don't know. Was that a second time speaking? Okay, well, I will speak. I can live by the sword, die by the sword, I get it. But I will say that it is up to the council to set those priorities. And so if the council wants to put new priorities in, you got to tell us what priorities you're going to kick off the plate. What are we going to tell staff no longer to put their time towards? Because that is a very difficult process that this council needs to sit down and knuckle down. And if you're going to add new priorities, you've got to be able to knock off other priorities and tell the staff, I'm sorry, that's not a priority, that's being pushed into the next term. Because it's unfair to keep blaming staff for these things not being prioritized when we can't set the priorities for it. Apologize for going over my time, but I really think that this is at the core challenge that we're going to have between here and the next election is going to be priority setting and implementation. Mr. Stewart.
Your worship, a very brief comment. This council has passed or approved or suggested more affordable housing projects than anything I've seen in the last 20 years in the district, and they should be proud of that. Is it to the extent that we would like? Perhaps not. But the fact of the matter is, we found is notwithstanding the district's willingness to shift to early zoning and all the rest of it, there is a process out there that requires our partners to go through an approval process and weigh in on it. And it is much slower than we would like, but that can't be laid at this staff's feet. We have pushed and pushed and pushed as hard as we can to get as many projects going. They are not moving as fast as we would like, but it's not for lack of will and desire. This staff has pivoted, understanding that council wants less market and more affordable and social housing. We're trying it as best as we can, but I have to say it requires partners at the federal government level, the provincial level, regional level, and we are trying to do what we can. And I don't accept, quite frankly, that it's not something that's important to us. Council's made that very clear at the beginning of this term, and we are working very, very hard to try to achieve that. And quite frankly, we've achieved more than we have in the last 20 years. So council should be proud of what they've initiated this term.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Councillor Bond.
I guess in my last 2 minutes and 1 minute and 58 seconds, one thing I thought about recently, and it kind of follows up on your comments, Mayor Little, about prioritization, is we have collected a lot of data. We've done a lot of study. And I do really think that it is time for some serious decision making. And you know, I do wonder how much council tries to control and micromanage a situation like the housing market in the District of North Vancouver, which is the result of thousands and tens of thousands of property owners and tens of thousands of people making individual decisions every day about what they may or might not do. And we're trying to collect data on how many bedrooms there are. And in getting mired down in that level of detail, I think we do miss the big picture. The need for housing in the District of North Vancouver, yes, of course, social and affordable housing to make up for the amount that has not been constructed over the past 30 years. And yes, rental housing to make up for the part that has not been constructed over the same time frame. But also all forms of housing. You know, the thing that I would not like to see come out of this is that the district tells people of low income that we are here for you. We're going to build 100, maybe 50 homes every year, so that hopefully wait lists will go down for social housing. But everyone else who might not fit in that category, it gets left out. And so I think we need to look at the scale that we're tackling this problem in, and really we do need to make some decisions and maybe some difficult decisions that on what things to prioritize and how to move forward more quickly, and maybe fewer studies and committees because we've got so much information already.
Point of order, Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Forbes.
Did we have a vote on, unless my computer's wrong, it's 10:20?
I was about to proceed to that, and yes, Councillor Forbes, I will have to address that within the next couple of minutes.
Okay.
And so I think it's only natural we're going to have to complete 8.6, and I highly recommend council that 8.8 is timely because we need to be able to get those grants moved on. And so I will ask for somebody, I'm going to take it that Councillor Forbes is going to support move the extension of the meeting beyond 10:30. Is there a seconder? Councillor Back. Call the question on the matter. All those in favor? Contrary minded, motion carries. And we'll continue the discussion on 8.6, but when we finish 8.6, I'm going to skip to 8.8 because it is more time sensitive than the other items. Apologies. Councillor Back.
Sorry, my hand was up there. Just a second that.
So, okay. Sorry, and Councillor Mon, you were completed with your remarks, is that correct? Okay, are there any other discussion remarks on item 8.6?
Well, I would.
Sorry, Councillor Murray. Just want to be clear, you have spoken your full 6 already.
I'm moving a referral motion to a workshop.
You're moving that we refer this matter to a workshop. Is that seconded?
To look at to have a discussion on priorities.
Okay. Is there a seconder to refer the matter to a workshop? I don't see. Oh, Councillor Forbes is seconding that. Okay, so now we'll have discussion on referral. Actually, there's no debate on referral. We'll just go.
No, that's deferral.
Deferral.
There's no debate on deferral.
Referral versus deferral. It's been a while since we've done this. Just checking in with the clerk. Being referred to a workshop, then is there debate? Okay, so there is debate on referral to a workshop, and so
yeah, this is not. I won't repeat myself. This is not a blame game. Staff does good work. But council has not had the opportunity to look at the priorities on our own. We've had a presentation from the task force, a couple of presentations from staff, now this report. Where do we get to vet and discuss the priorities based on how we would like to move forward? We're going to be making these decisions into the future, so we should be having an opportunity to discuss these priorities, maybe reorganizing them. If there's not sufficient resources, then maybe we put resources into them, and we have input to staff in regards to what we feel are the priorities. We never have had an opportunity to discuss that, because when the task force came forward, they made their presentation, staff went away, they created what they thought would work, but council has not had an opportunity to throw out their ideas in regards to the priorities. So I think why is that so unreasonable? We should be able to have that discussion. Then out of that, a report is created and it comes forward with a timeline and a direction. And we want, in regards to the discussion on data, we want current data. We want the most up-to-date data we can get. And we're still waiting for the release of the census. So, I just think that we really haven't given this an opportunity to have a good discussion about our priorities. We know what staff's are. We know what the communities are based on the work from the task force. Now let's give ourselves an opportunity to discuss the priorities and see how these tables, move.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Forbes, you were the seconder on the matter. Do you have any comment? Oh, Councillor Forbes, you're muted.
Sorry. No, I don't have any extra comments.
Okay, on referral, are there any other comments? So I'll make some comments here. I don't know that we need to refer this to a workshop to address those priorities, because the problem is it won't help us say what we're not going to do, because it's not going to have all of the other priorities that we've already assigned to staff for the remainder of the term. And we've already done that amongst staff. Staff from time to time check in on work plan priorities. Council updates it from time to time. And so the problem with separating a workshop from all of the other items that we deal with and that we've directed staff to do is that we won't be addressing the critical issue, which is telling us what you don't want to do, which is telling us what in the priorities that we have set for the staff going forward for the next year, telling staff what you're not going to do. Because the last time we had the discussion about general priorities, of course, everybody wanted every priority to go forward. They were all critically important. It can't work that way. And so if we have it divorced in a workshop format where we're not addressing the other issues, I don't know that we're going to solve the problem. We'll be telling them what council priorities are, but we won't be telling them what council priorities are amongst other council priorities. And that is the critical point. That is
but Mayor Little,
not going to pursue things that we've decided not to pursue, that we've decided are a lower priority. And so I absolutely, I hear that some members of council don't feel like they've been able to input their concerns and priorities into the process. I just don't think a workshop will solve the problem, because it won't address all of the other priorities that we've set. And that's my challenge. I see Councillor Bond, you're next.
I was going to have similar comments to yours, Mayor Little, and I think this report sits within planning and sits within the reason almost exclusively, and Mr. Milburn can correct me if I'm wrong, almost exclusively within the realm of Mr. Milburn's department. And I think that coming from that department and coming from our new housing planner and the supporting staff, the amount of work that they've laid out in this existing report that they have committed to and the timelines that they are laying out is probably a good indication of what our staff can do. So if there was a workshop, it would be picking apart those different sub-recommendations that staff have put in that priority action list, the ones that we haven't started but we are going to start, and the ones that we are currently doing, and swapping them around. And perhaps Mr. Milburn, if you can comment on that, the one thing I wouldn't want to happen in going to a workshop is delaying any of the work that has already been prioritized in this plan, because like I said, I think it's all needed. But I have similar hesitations as yourself, Mayor Little, about going to a workshop and not having that framework in order to understand staff's capability, and then in addition, micromanaging staff's time. Mr. Milburn has a large department with a varied portfolio, and really we're down to managing the time of a few individual staff members in that department by breaking down this report into sections and cutting and pasting it into other ones. So I'm not sure if Mr. Milburn has a comment on that, or Mr. Stewart perhaps, but okay.
Mr. Milburn, do you have a response on that? Our staff's capability to get these projects already contemplated in the priorities that you've set for in the order of priority that you've set?
Yes, Your Worship, we consider staff's ability to produce in terms of response. The recommendations of the task force have been considered in the context of the directions council's already provided. And that was really the purpose of this report, is to set it within the context of council's priority directions as defined through the OCP action plan, etc., so that council can see that the alignment is aligning well with how we've already dedicated our resources based on prior direction. And one thing staff have pointed out to me is that really the table 1, the priority actions, and the actions that are already underway really reflect the absolute bulk, the almost entirely the high priority items that the task force has identified. So we're trying to see alignment here. And one thing I would note is well, that the bulk of the work, yes, is in the P division. There are other divisions that participate in this conversation, including finance has a very significant portion of this work. And so we do call on them and work side by side with them on bringing this information back to council on a routine basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker is Councillor Kern.
I think staff has laid this out pretty clearly just in this most recent conversation. And I agree, like all of these policies nest together under the broader policy of the OCP, and then we have the OCP action plan, and we have all these supporting plans, and we have all these council initiatives, which we've already been told is too many initiatives to accomplish. And so I think that one thing that may not be clear in this is that some of these are indeed in motion, but it might seem like there's more discussion around it. It doesn't, from my understanding, staff is looking at some of these. Maybe we think it's taking longer than we had hoped, but there's the pandemic and there's lots of contributing factors. So I appreciate that. I'm going to repeat what I said another time. I do feel like the task force did great work and said to get on with it. I feel like we're in our 3rd year of council, and there's more we can do. I believe that the report that Councillor Braun brought forward quite some time ago is coming back, and that's going to be looking at things a bit more systemically, like what are the different options, looking at several different properties at once, which is something that I want to do. I don't feel like we need to have that meeting, and I don't feel like it would be an effective use of staff or council's time to do that. I think that we have to keep moving forward with these items that have been identified in multiple policies and action them.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beck.
Totally agree with the comments made by Councillor Curran and Councillor Bond and yourself, Your Worship. I don't see adding another workshop as speeding anything up or accelerating any of these actions. I think we need to get on with it, as Councillor Curran has said, and that's certainly the feedback that I've heard from the task force members that I've spoken to recently. So I support what staff have laid out here in terms of the action plan. So let's take action. I don't think we need to have another workshop to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. And just checking in, so we do one round on a referral? One round of 2 minutes on referral. So we've gone through that now. Okay, I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? All those opposed? I see 5 votes opposed with councillors Back, Curran, Bond, Hanson, and myself opposed. Is that correct? That reflects your record? Thank you. Okay. Which returns us back to the regular item where I believe we had largely completed the speaking order. And so this is the staff recommendation that has been moved and seconded and is on the floor. Call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Okay. Thank you, Council. I'm going to vary the agenda slightly so that we put item 8.8 in as a priority, just because there is a time-sensitive nature about it. And so now we're going to move on to item 8.8, which is 2021 Community Heritage Grants. And I'm going to go to staff for comment.
Thank you very much, Mayor Little. Very short overview, if I can. These are the recommended 2021 Community Heritage Grants program for your consideration. Just a bit of background, Council this past July made updates to the Heritage Grants program in line with the award-winning Heritage Strategic Plan. The big change here was to increase the value of grants available from $500 to a larger range of $1,000 to $10,000 and to have more categories of eligible projects. The Community Heritage Advisory Committee did review and recommend all of the applicants that are in this report today. In total, there were 13 applications that we received and 9 recommended for grant funding for your consideration. The total value of the awarded grants, if approved by Council, would be just over $38,000. We would also seek authority to draw some funds from the Community Heritage Grants Fund, which is held with the North Shore Community Foundation for just over $3,300. So the recommendation before you is that 9 grants totaling $38,000 be approved today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Bond, you're moving the staff recommendation? Yeah. Okay, and I will second. Councillor Bond, your comments?
Thanks, Mayor Little. Just want to recognize the hard work of the Community Heritage Advisory Committee, reviewing and discussing and ranking. Deciding on the ranking criteria for the annual grant program is one of the major tasks that the committee put forward, and they put several hours and a couple meetings into discussing these grants. I think one thing that we've noticed on the committee, and I'm the council representative, the liaison on the committee, is that since the changes in the grant program resulting from the Heritage Strategic Plan that council passed recently, I'll say, we're seeing a greater number of applications, and also the applications, due to the greater grant value, seem to be making a more positive impact on the types and the amount of heritage restoration and preservation that can occur on properties. I remember previous grant awards were somewhere in the $500 range, which obviously is a very small amount for an individual wanting to maintain or restore the heritage qualities of their property. And I think that we have seen one of the new categories, specifically the heritage planning category, receive a grant award this year is also a good step forward. Part of the reason for changing the grant program was to encourage people to move down a pipeline towards heritage preservation, to look at both documenting and investigating the process of designating their property. And so the planning grants allow for applicants to do a planning study, which is kind of the first step into designating a property. And so I'm glad to see that, glad to support the work of the committee here, and glad to see these grants recommended.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Happy to second, but I just have a quick question. Just as we start to get used to this granting process, I think it would actually be helpful to describe the unsuccessful candidates, obviously not with the detail of whose it was, but perhaps staff could tell us about the 4 rejected ones. What was it that we weren't comfortable with? What was it that didn't achieve our heritage goals? Just those kinds of things, just so we can help understand what would be a successful candidate as well.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Yes, I can do that briefly. We did have some slides that we could have pulled up to show all of them if need be, but I appreciate the time is late. The four that the committee did not recommend, one was a material that was not sympathetic and not a good example of keeping in heritage character with mid-century modern property. Another one where an applicant had submitted 2 applications, whereas only one can be submitted. A third one being remedial action was current permits were open. Sorry, I'm just looking through as I go along here. Unpaid taxes at the time of the committee evaluation, property taxes. And the final one, another related to materials and that were not considered in keeping with the heritage character of the property.
I think I understood all of those, but one I just want to double check. You said open permit. So that means that because they had other construction going on at the project at the time that was not in a complete state, they were rejected for this grant. Is that correct?
I will clarify, Your Worship, that the main factor was the property taxes had been unpaid at the time. There was an open electrical permit for the project and an open aquatic waterfront permit.
Okay, so it was delinquent permits that were not getting closed were largely the reason for not processing the new one. I'm just trying to understand. Councillor Bond, you were part of that process as well.
I'm not sure if it was in this round, but staff do have to do a check to make sure that there is no current work or construction being done on site that is not currently permitted. And I know in the past that has been one of the reasons for not qualifying for a grant. So if a homeowner is doing unpermitted work, then they are not eligible for a grant. As you can imagine, we would want homeowners to be pulling and following all of the bylaws associated with doing any work. So, Ms. Atfa, I'm not sure if that was the one of the reasons for this existing one, but I know it's been on previous applications.
Just to reiterate again, the main reason was it was ineligible because the property taxes had been unpaid at the time the committee was evaluating.
Okay, and so then the other question I would have is, what is the time? Like, when was, again, similar to what we were talking about earlier in the night, from the time someone applies for the grant and intends to start to do the work, and obviously they have to hear back whether they get the grant, or are we rebating it? They've done the work and we're rebating it. So it doesn't, well, technically then it doesn't delay a project. It just means that the person doesn't know if they get rebated or not until after the fact, correct?
Thank you, Your Worship. There is a time frame. You can apply for work done the year before or a work that will be completed within a year.
Okay. All right. Well, I did some stuff about 5 years ago. Does that count? Okay. I don't see any other speakers on the matter, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Okay, thank you, Council. And I'll resume the order, recognizing that we have about 18 minutes left before we have to seek an extension. 8.7, this is the district contributions to affordable housing, and wondering if we have a representative from planning going to speak to this matter. Ms. Atfa?
Thank you very much. I've got also like to introduce Ryan Gilmore, one of our newer community planners at the district, who was instrumental in getting this report together. This report gives information to you on the district's contribution to the creation of social and supportive housing since the official community plan was adopted. ROCP, as we well know, emphasizes the provision of housing and the creation of social and supportive housing in particular. And our rental and affordable housing strategy provides even more specific goals about how we protect existing affordable housing and expand the supply through the district. I'll note that in October 3 years ago, the majority of district voters did vote in favor of a referendum question asking if they support the district spending up to $150 million to create not less than 1,000 units of non-market housing to be constructed no later than January 2029. This report summarizes that since the OCP was adopted, the district has provided approximately $127 million in both direct and indirect financial contributions, which support 15 affordable housing projects. This has resulted in over 650 new units of social housing and 240 units of supportive housing. Since the referendum in these 3 years, approximately $81 million has been contributed. As well, recently council supported retaining 94 existing social housing units. These were the Seymour Lines projects. So these new and retained units of social and supportive housing represent real progress in towards increasing the supply of housing not traditionally provided by the market. The report you will see sets out, and we hope, which is easy to understand way, 7 different groupings of contributions. 1, long-term leases of district land, housing amenity contributions, waivers of development cost charges, waivers of application fees, other works and services that the district funds, foregone tax revenue, and finally land dedications for road allowance. There's a little bit on there. So it's also worthwhile to point out that the contributions from the district also allow a lot of leverage contributions from external partners, such as BC Housing and nonprofit housing operators. And those leverage contributions noted in the report are estimates only. They will be updated by our partners as time goes on. So these figures represent, I'll say, just as I close off here, that they are the best, they are estimates based on the best available information. The methodology is described in attachment 1 of the report. The recommendation is that you receive this report for information. Staff are here to answer questions. Thank you.
Very much. Okay, Council, looking for your direction on this one. Hey, Councillor Murray with your hand up. Councillor Murray, will you be supporting it?
I'll move receipt of the report.
Okay, is there a seconder on the matter? Seconded by Councillor Hanson. Okay, Councillor Murray, your comments?
Thank you. It's an interesting report. I mean, there's lots of interesting things that come out of it. I'm wondering if the total amount of units, well, I guess we counted social housing units. And I think this is one of the challenges that we continue to face is there's social housing units, but there's also affordable housing, and affordable housing could be old housing. It makes it more affordable. We kind of, use these terms differently. We don't really have a consistent way of using the terms or implementing them into discussions such as this one. So why were we using just social housing versus, because the referendum talked about affordable housing, why were we just using social housing versus affordable housing, which could have been older housing?
Ms. Adva,